Welcome back to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson from Proteum Machining, and this week I'm joined by Joe Roggenbuck from Cobra Framebuilding.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you for taking the time. So, this is the first time you're on the podcast. Let's
Uh-huh.
kind of dive in and kind of your origin story. How did you get into manufacturing? Go as far back as you want. And how'd you get here?
Yeah. So I'm 30 now, and like 10 years ago or 11 years ago, I got into bicycles. And I don't know, I guess it's kind of a earth nerd or hippie or whatever. And I thought it'd be great to not be burning gas all the time. But I really liked bikes and I got super into them. And then pretty quickly, uh, I heard about like artisan bike making, like fabricating a bicycle frame that's made to measure and all this stuff. And there's a whole bunch of people who do this. And I took a class when I was 20. And then I didn't know anything about fabrication. My dad he was a farmer, so they had MIG welders and Ellis bandsaw and an old Goodway lathe and some of that stuff. But I didn't really know that much about metalworking and certainly didn't know anything about machining. I didn't know what a Bridgeport was really. And I took this class, and you learn how to make a very old school, sort of like vintage steel bicycle with like 4130 tubing and like silver brazing and bronze brazing. And I just love that whole world, making these beautiful bicycles. And I love cycling, and it was just a good fit of things. And so I spent, after I finished college, which was totally unrelated, I got a sociology degree. It's totally unrelated to making stuff. But anyway, after that, I just lived as cheap as I could, and I worked as little as I could for other people so that I could afford to have some small rinky dink, 300 square foot shop that I would, play with fire and make these things. And I always wanted more tools, and people make and sell the tooling that you would use to make bikes, but it's pretty expensive when you don't have any money. And anyway, so I would like kind of dink around and make it. I had one of those Harbor Freight mini mills that takes the R8 collet. Somebody sold me one of those for $300, and I used that for a while. You can't do much on that. And then in 2015, there was somebody selling a Bridgeport on eBay in my city in Syracuse, New York. And anyway, I called the guy up. He had his phone number, and he had a whole machine shop, and I made him a lowball offer, and he just accepted it. I thought he was going to counteroffer. So for the first time in my life, I had all these old machines. It was like a 1967 Bridgeport and a Clousing manual lathe and vertical bandsaw, horizontal bandsaw, drill press, disc sander, some other various things. It was $3,500, which was amazing. Really good deal on that stuff. And I moved that into my shop, and I powered them up to three phase, and I started playing. And I think that's around the time that I became aware of Tom Lipton. And I just watched pretty much every video he's ever made. And I always tell people that I think Tom Lipton is like, he's kind of my shop teacher. He's sort of my mentor. There's a lot of people that I've learned a lot of little things from, but I think Tom really, like, watching his videos is what taught me the love of the work. And I think also design stuff, now that I kind of make and design my own tools. Like, I pick up lots of details for how to do that from a lot of places. But when Tom would talk about, making a knob and making it decorative, but giving it the flutes for the grip, and talking about, using 954 bronze for this nut because it's got a good, sort of wear characteristic and slipperiness. And just the way that he talks about that really helped me be excited to build things and helped inform my judgment about how I did that. And so anyway, I did a lot of manual machining projects for a couple of years. And then, I kept like trying to make bikes here and there. And then Jeff Tiedekin, I sort of knew him through the internet, and this would have been like 2017 or something. And I remember I asked him one time, I DM'd him, and I'm like, can I give you a phone call sometime and get some career advice from you? And he's like, sure. And then I talked to him, and he talked to me for like an hour, which was awesome on the phone. And anyway, I asked him, like, how would I crack into getting like a CNC machining job if I wanted to? Like, I'm getting sort of competent with manual machining, but I don't have any work experience. Like, who's going to hire me? Never went to trade school. And he gave me some advice that was cool. He said, just like show up at a machine shop. And if they have NDAs and they can't show you stuff, then they won't. But if they can show you stuff, a lot of times they'll give you a tour. And then a lot of times you need an excuse to get out of there because they're just going to bend your ear all day and you need to like have some reason that you can leave. And so I did that. I sat on that advice for 6 months. I finally went in this place and I felt really like weird about it, but I was like, yeah, I'll just try it, I'll see if it works. And I was like willing to take a job. And I also was just kind of curious to see the shop, but I really wanted a tour before I was asking for a job application. I walked into the lobby and anyway, I walked into the lobby and I felt super embarrassed, but I was like, can I like get a tour or something? I don't know. And she's like, we don't really do that here. And I'm like, can you give me an application? So I started filling out an application, and then that led to me getting a job there. The president of the company, after a minute comes out and he's like, oh, I'll show you around. And then he's like, oh, it seems like you would be great here. And I worked there. That was the only machine shop job I ever had, is I guess the point of that story. I worked there for 9 months. They had like 9 Matsuras from the 90s and early 2000s. And they had one old Hardinge Conquest 42 lathe from 1990 that has a similar FANUC control to my current lathe. And so it's part of what I like about this machine is it reminds me of that first CNC machine I ever ran. But anyway, yeah, I did that for a while, and it was kind of the wrong fit for me. There was no potential to really learn anything there. They just wanted somebody to like saw material and load parts, and I got tired of that. And I walked into the office of the owner of the company, and I said, like, I need some opportunities to like try something. Like, can you let me come in after hours and like, try something? Or like, I would ask my manager if I broke a tool on the Matsura or something. I'd say, oh, sorry, I did this. I loaded another tool in the holder. Like, I don't know how to touch it off. And he would just kind of walk past me and press a bunch of buttons and then walk away again. And it's the easiest thing in the world to touch off a tool, but I didn't know how to do it. And he like would guard that information from me because he was threatened by me or something. And,
Oh man.
and it was the Matsura horizontals, which are sweet. And they had this really goofy way. They didn't program off the center line of the pallet. They programmed 3 different work coordinates if they were going to clock it on 90 degrees, and you had 3 different, orientations to the part. And so they would set 3 different H values for the tool. Like, it was crazy. And their G54, G55, they didn't have a Z value. It was an XY value. And then they would do the tool length. The H value would be the Z correction. And so if you needed to use it on different work coordinates, they would have anyway, it was ridiculous. So when you would break a little 1/8" carbide engraver tool or something, which I did quite a bit, you had to touch it off in 3 spots.
Yeah. A guy I program for does the same thing. I'm like, man, just get like a manual tool setter or something and stop
Yeah,
setting your tools every single operation. This is
it's
ridiculous.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were using little edge finders that'd spin up at 1,000 RPMs, and it's cool because I had never been around CNCs, so I didn't know. Like, I did get a lot out of that job, especially the first month. I would see the workflow and I would see what the machines can do and the cycle times, and I just saw a lot of stuff that I hadn't seen before. But after about a month or so, it's just like there wasn't anything that new that I was learning. And like, I would run the lathe all day, and so I would kind of take it upon myself to like figure out how to adjust an offset if I, like if the insert was worn or something. And
Mhm.
so I kind of like figured it out, but like they just didn't want me to like advance. It was crazy. It was just like, you'd think that you would want people who could solve their own problems. You didn't need to babysit, but
Yeah, I
um,
think there's far too many shops that are like that out there, unfortunately.
yeah. And some of the parts were kind of cool, but anyway, it was it was a small machine shop. I was like one of like 4 people there, and so I did that for a while, and I just got fed up with that, and I wanted to do more. And I had been used to spending my entire 20s living like a super dirt bag. I was in Syracuse, New York, and it's a cheap city, and it's not New York City, it's central New York. It's Everybody gets confused about that. You say New York and they think you're talking about the city, but it's very cheap to live there. And then I had it really cheap because I was always sniffing out deals, and I was used to living on nothing. So to be working full time and making sort of an honest wage, I had to like a fair amount of money saved up after 9 months. And I quit that job. I enrolled in the Saunders Machine Works classes that they were offering, and that was really cool. And I did that for like a whole week, and then I came back and I had the CNC fever. I needed my own machine. I had this shop that I had been renting cheap always to do fabrication in for bikes, and I was like, I think I could squeeze a small CNC in here. And so I bought one, and I put it in my shop. And then
Wow.
and then I figured it would take me like 6 months, to like figure out how to make anything worth a damn. But it was like, what took a little while was like I had to wire it up. which I did myself. I had to move it. That was real complicated. I had to figure out coolant. I had to figure out, tool holders and vices and work offsets and stuff. But once I did all those things in the post processor and the floppy disk for Fusion, but once I did those things, it was like, oh. And then like within a week or something, I had some parts that I started to sell, and I just never went back to work. I always figured when I quit the job, I figured, I don't have that much money and I'm going to blow it real fast if I buy a machine. But like I'll buy an old cheap machine. It was $7,000 for this old machine. It was a 1996 Bridgeport Torque Cut 22. It probably
Oh
cost
wow.
me $10,000 by the time I had moved it and I had tool holders and stuff and the wiring and all that, and which is cheap, certainly to get a machine with a tool changer going in your shop. But anyway, I just figured I would like use this stint where I didn't have a job. I was going to like increase my skill set so that I knew how to set up and program the machines at least a little bit. And then I would just re-enter the job market and try and find a better machining job. And I just never had to, because like immediately I started to sell stuff that people were into and buying. And I didn't want to go back to work. And so I just kept it cheap and I was growing it. And so that's like the last nearly 3 years now. I think it was April of, you know, almost 3 years ago that I got that machine.
Wow, that's awesome. I had no idea that you just kind of jumped in with both feet at the very beginning of your business. I'd assumed that you were, kind of doing that on the side, CNC wise, for a long
Yeah.
time before you did.
No, I didn't. I mean, I had done a lot of manual machining over the years. I just loved that so much. And like, it was like kind of my whole world. I think once I got the machines, I really, that kind of took over. Like I still love bikes, and I like the idea of making them, but I think since I got my hands on machining in about 2015, it was like that was my first love at that point. And so when you then finally get your hands on CNC, and with Fusion 360 software being so easy, it's just like it doesn't take that long for those skills to translate into something where. And so I always think like when I see somebody who's pretty good with manual machining, I'm like, you get them on a CNC and like 2 weeks later they're going to be really good. That's my take.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a lot easier to teach the computer side of it to a lot of people than it is you know the feel and the inherent knowledge of like cutting tool paths and cutting forces and all of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like if you just wanted to get going as fast as you could and you didn't have any experience, I didn't learn CNC first, but I feel like that's probably not a bad way to learn. But that's just a guess because, I didn't do it that way. So maybe I'm taking for granted how long it took to understand all the stuff that I slowly learned through manual machining.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of ways to skin that cat to get to the final destination of like being a CNC machinist.
Yeah.
I think that there are definitely quicker ways to get there, but that don't always lead to the same deep understanding. Like I see a lot of people, and I don't know your experience with it, but I see a lot of people skipping over like learning G code itself and
Yeah.
just jumping into CAM. And then when it comes down to like editing their post processor or having to hand edit something that their post processor isn't doing right or something that they want to try out, they are lost or really,
Yeah.
scared to edit that code because they see it as this master code. Whereas, a lot of people who know G code, they're like, oh, it's just another language. Like, I want to
Hmm.
speak this way instead of this way.
Yeah, when I had that job, I wanted so badly. I almost didn't care about the paycheck. I just wanted to learn. And it was the opposite for them. But I remember I had gone online and, printed out a list of all the common GNM codes. And I had that at the machine, and it'd be like a 3 minute cycle on the Metsura or whatever. And I'd just be like, it's like a circa 2000 Fanic control or something, but like the code is screaming past, or sometimes it's going slow. And I'm just like, M06 or something, and I'm like, what is that? And I'm like looking back and forth and trying to just memorize them. I got a flashcard app and I put in all the GNM codes because, in hindsight, it's like I didn't need to. I don't think that's the starting place that makes the most sense if you have another way. But like I didn't have another way. That was where I was at, and they were guarding all the information. So I was like, well, this is one thing I can work on, and then the code will make more sense to me if I can kind of read it. And yeah, it's not a
Yeah,
bad
that's
idea to do flashcards.
no, not at all. Well, that's crazy that they didn't see that and encourage that. Like we had at
Yeah.
the first shop I worked at, we had this guy Victor who did not speak English very well, was straight from Mexico, would very often go back over the border to visit his family. And he would do the same thing. He would like call me over and be like, "What does this mean? What are you doing here?" And I was like, "This is the best person to run my programs because he actually cares. Like,
Yeah.
why?" That's insane to me that they would just be like, "Oh, we want to guard all our secrets from Joe. He can't learn
Yeah.
anything."
You know what's crazy is one day the shop manager, he was like, there was about 20 people in this company. It was more sheet metal than it was machining, so the machining was kind of a sideline. And the manager of the machine shop was probably the most driven person at the entire company, other than possibly me. But he had been there 17 years, and I think he was kind of maybe threatened by me or whatever it is. But anyway, he had to do something the one day, and he was gone, and something happened. It was a pallet changer, horizontal Matsura, and the two other guys in the machine shop who had been there for like 15 years, the two of them, the collectively, they had been there for 15 years, and none of us could figure out how to do a pallet change like a M65 or whatever it was, or maybe it was, yeah, it's probably a sub program or something. But anyway, none of us knew how to do a pallet change so that we could touch off a tool. They knew how to touch off a tool, but we had to touch it off on the other pallet, and like nobody could figure out how to just in MDI get it to change the pallets. And so like that machine sat for hours while we waited for him to get back, and I had to like sweep up and find other things to do. And it's just insane that that kind of thing can happen in those. I mean, I don't know if that place is still open or not, but like I feel like the days are numbered when that's sort of the way that you operate.
Oh yeah, yeah, it totally, because you are encouraging the aging out of your qualified staff,
Yeah.
and you're not bringing them up. And like we're seeing that, I think, globally and workforce wide right now. Like we've encouraged people to like go to school, and blue collar is bad for so long that like I know here we've got Raytheon locally, and they're like scared of the next maybe 5 or 10 years because all of their qualified machinists are aging out, and like there's not a whole lot of people going to college for this, or starting to work in shops or anything like that. And so they're seriously worried about that. Like I've heard that the union here is like they've reached out to our local community college to try to like boost that program and have it tailored more to like the kind of people that they need. And I think that we're gonna in the next 5 or 10 years really start to see big gaps in the workforce.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Which, sorry.
for people, oh no, I was gonna say, for people that don't know what you build, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously it's frame building. So what parts do you make? What's your whole business about? For anybody who doesn't follow you, that
Yeah.
even though they definitely should, so go over to Joe's Instagram and follow him.
Yeah. So there are some players in this industry who make the tooling for the artisan bike builder. And I think that it is, if you're not familiar with this small, like handmade bicycle world, it tends to be like the idea for a lot of people is that it's a romantic idea to have like a one person shop. You know, it's like maybe it's in your garage or you have a pole barn or you rent a space somewhere, but it's like your personal shop and you are personally the brand and you make this bespoke. It's like the hand tailored suit. You know, it's like this, you make this bike for somebody and they're going to love it. It's going to fit them so well. It's going to ride great. It's going to have the paint they want, the colors they want. And they need tools to do that. And some people will make all their own tools and some people will buy them. And so, anyway, there have always been people that would sell you these tools, and I was too cheap to buy them. And so, as I made more and more of them myself, I just really loved that. And then I wanted to get into CNC, and that's where I started, is in that niche. But it's been good to me, and that's kind of where that's completely where I'm at. I don't do any other work. I don't do job shop work. I don't do any other projects. I just make my own product line. So I have a tube bender for bending, thin wall chromoly and titanium, and people even bend aluminum with it. So that's really cool. It's kind of a unique design that is driven by a lead screw. So a lot of benders are manual and you bolt it to something heavy and then you're reefing on a lever. And that gets tough when you get into larger diameter tubes. And so mine, all the force is contained within the tool by the lead screw. And so you could clamp it to a card table or something flimsy and it doesn't matter because all the force is contained within the tool. And so it's this small little package. You could just kind of put it on a rubber hook on the wall when you weren't using it or something. It's pretty slick. Whereas like if you're used to like a diacro manual bender or a JD squared bender or something, those like tend to eat a lot more floor space and there's like different pros and cons. But anyway, I think mine is pretty cool. So I make that tube bender. That's been the big ticket item. And there's a whole bunch of interchangeable dies. I have a whole list of cabinet now that's pretty much full of the dies and stuff for that. It's a lot and tied up in inventory, but you need a couple of each, at least two or three. And there's like there's like 30 different bending dies. And then I have some smaller tools, and the one of them is just it's a little aluminum clamp that it's very simple, but it just allows you to hold the cable guides and the different they call them brazons in the bike world, because you would, in the old school, you would braze them with like silver brazing or bronze brazing, but you braze them on, and so like little cable guides and little pieces of steel and titanium, or you could weld them on now. And so I call those brazon clamps, but they're just like a little clamp that has a particular geometry that works pretty good and gives you good access with your torch so that you can get that work done. I tend to sell those in a 3-pack. And then I have some mitering tools. So if you were to try and make a cut in thin wall tubing, and especially if it's like not round, it can be tough to hold that tubing. And so a lot of people will get, just like an old milling machine, like a Bridgeport or horizontal mill or something, and they'll use a hole saw, actually, like a high-speed steel, or a bimetal hole saw like a plumber uses. But you just mount it to a heavy arbor, and you can make a nice cut through this thin tubing, better than you might assume. But you need a way to hold the tube, and so you can use tube blocks if your tubes are round. But what if they're tapered, or what if they're not round? And so I make some tools that allow you to hold that tubing, and then just hold this tool in like a milling vise, like a Kurt vise or something. And so I sell a fair amount of those too. And it's just like, and then I have a podcast and I have a YouTube channel, and I'm just trying to like be a part of that whole ecosystem, because I love the whole frame building world, and it's the only thing that I'm probably qualified to design tools for, if I even am. So yeah, that's what I do. And then I, have the whole machine shop to support that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking at your website right now. I love your product names too, like Miter Daddy and Tube Bender, and yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, it's a fun world, because I think there's different people in it, of course, but I think this sort of customer profile is like a starving artist. It's like somebody who just wants to do what they love, and they don't take it any more seriously than they need to a lot of times. Or if they take it seriously, it's in like the craft. It's not in the attitude and the professional, like suit and tie sort of way. And so people seem to appreciate, having a little bit of fun with it, and send it sort of fun naming. And, if you're like Fifth Axis or Orange Vice or something, like, I don't know that you get away with the kookier names and the silliness or something. Maybe you would, but I think the little niche that I'm in is a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I'm also looking at your shop tour tab. You got to update that thing.
Yeah, no, that's old.
Still have the torque cut, still have the Bridgeport.
Yeah, no, I don't have any of that stuff now, and it's good and bad. But I think something that's allowed me to be as successful as I've been with my business the last couple of years is that I know that for me, the number one goal right now is to build my business to maturity, so that I don't have to go and get a job for someone else. And so I'm like triaging all these things that I'd like to do. I would really like to build out my current space so that it's nice. I would really like to have better work-life balance eventually. I would really like to make the website better and automate these things. But it's like, there is no one thing that is even close to as important to me as releasing this next product that I'm on the cusp of releasing, this frame welding fixture that I've been working on for a long time. And so it's just hard, because it's like every other thing is like so much less important to me. And it's kind of hard to be that tough with yourself about all these things. And so the website does need to get updated. It wouldn't take me that long to throw on some other pictures, so I should do that. But it's just
No,
like
I'm just giving you shit.
but like every little thing, it's like, it's hard to live your life when you're so aware that like there is one goal that is head and shoulders more important than every other thing. It's like I need to grow into maturity to where, and I'm trying to hire somebody now, and other steps too, but like I need to grow into a level where I can breathe and I can do the things that are not only the most important, but that I also have the capacity to do the 10 things below that too.
Totally. So let's you briefly mentioned them. Let's talk about two big decisions you made in the last couple of years. One, buying the Haas and going from the old torque cut to that, and then also you just recently moved,
Yeah.
not fully across the country, but states. So
Yep.
let's kind of talk through those. Like, how did you? I guess first, how did you decide to jump into the Haas? What was part of the decision making process, and then yeah, we can jump into moving to where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. So with the Haas, I mean, with my first machine, I'll talk about that for a minute, because that was a sweet machine. And also I will say that when you're looking at older machines as a first machine, or when you're looking at first machines in general, I'm not a fan of like the Tormachs and stuff. I think those are really good for like a school or something, but I don't think they're good for production. They don't have any horsepower, and like chip management would be a nightmare, and they're really slow. And I'm just not a fan of them for, I feel like the learning curve with CNC is pretty short. And then you're like, now what? And
Right.
so if you get an old industrial machine, yeah, you're probably going to be fixing on it every once and again, but you can at least like crank some shit out. You know, you can really get some work done on an old machine that has a tool changer and an enclosure. And so I'm really glad that the first machine I got was at least as capable as it was. I think I saw there's a question from Thomas Hosford. He was really helpful to me over the years. I talked to him when I still had that other job. He was trying to sell one of his torque cut machines because he had two of those. And I didn't actually buy one of his, but I did end up buying another one of that model from somewhere in Connecticut, somebody on Craigslist. And it was a sweet machine. It had a tool changer and an enclosure, and you could actually load a pretty big program into memory for 1996. It was a 256K. It
Oh
didn't
wow.
it didn't hold, or it didn't read code very quickly. So if you wanted to do like a ball mill chamfer, like surfacing thing, and you turn smoothing way up, it still would just trip over the code, or 2D adaptive. I didn't do a whole lot of that unless I couldn't find another way to get the part machined. But anyway, it was a sweet machine. It just, the issue was that the spindle was like miserably, miserably loud. I've never heard a machine so loud. And then it just kept breaking on me. The tool changer and different things would have faults, and then you lose a couple days trying to figure out how to fix it. And I felt like I was at a point where if I just had a new, reliable, faster machine, I'd be able to cover more ground. And so I looked at, I never really wanted a Haas. I just felt like they weren't that cool, but I guess they won me over because I really appreciate the way that they put all the information front and center. Like, if you want to, and it's true still, like if I want to learn about how to do, I was doing, I think G10, where you update the work offset within the program, can be really useful for some probing stuff. And I mean, it's like a Google search, and like 2 minutes later, you have your answer and you're off and running. It's like that with everything. If you want to learn about something, they have YouTube videos on most of the stuff, or it's just like, and also like before you buy it, like once you own it and you have the manual, then you can start to really get to know it. But I feel like when you have I never worked at a shop that had any machines other than those old Matsuras and stuff. So like, I didn't really know that much about these different machines, but when you're shopping for a Haas, it's like you can see pretty much what it does because everybody has one, and there's like a million YouTube videos. And so it made it a lot easier to approach it. And then the pricing is transparent, and the pricing was like way too good. They're always running some, I
Yeah.
got, it
If
was
you pay
20.
full price, you're a sucker. That's for sure.
And even like if you did pay full price, it's still like pretty reasonable prices. But then it's just, yeah, I never paid that much attention to the deals. I was just aware that they had some. And then I went to buy it, and it was like 20% off. If it was 15% off, but if you added a rotary, then it was 20% off of everything. So like the cost bump to add the rotary was like $5,000 or something. And I was like, well, this is a no brainer. And yeah, definitely was best decision ever to get a fourth on this. But yeah, so I wanted a machine. I was going to get a VF2 probably because I had such a tiny, tiny shop. It was like 400 square feet. And I didn't think I needed a big one. My old machine had 22 inches on X, which was a little small, but I figured a VF2 would be plenty, which is 30 inches on X. And then I was looking at it, and I was like, well, maybe if I get a slightly bigger machine, the footprint is not that much bigger. So I started looking at a VF3, and I asked my sales guy about it, and he said, the VF4 is exactly the same size as the VF3. It's just got a bigger table, but like the sheet metal and the casting and the footprint is the same. And I was like, well, then why the hell would anybody ever buy a VF3? There's no reason.
Right.
And I still mostly feel that way. So I bought a VF4, not because I needed it, but I just thought, it's not a whole lot more money to get it. And then it allows you to keep more set up at once and allows you to put more parts in at once. And I'm really glad that I got that because I have two vices on the left. I have a Pearson pallet in the middle, which at this point I hardly use, but I think I'm going to keep it because it's really useful for some stuff. And then on the right, I got my rotary with a fifth axis rock lock base. And because they're always all set up, every part I make, I can get set up like pretty damn quick. And that's a huge deal to me because I do such a high mix of things. I have like already like 60, or with the frame fixture, it's going to be like 100 different parts that I make. And you can't afford to run like 3 years quantity of those at once. So you're setting up and rerunning stuff every couple months. So that means like every couple days you need to, do a setup on these things, if not more often. And it's just the setups kill. So if I can keep everything set up is amazing.
Yeah, you've been putting a lot of effort in, and we've talked a lot off air about your fifth axis on the fourth, and ways to kind of make all these things quicker and faster and all that stuff. And it's really cool to see. I feel like there are a lot of people out there that don't put the time and effort into quick setups that you do, and it's always nice when I see a message from you. I'm like, oh man, like I'm gonna dive into something new or something
Yeah.
enjoyable every time we talk. So
Yeah,
uh,
I feel
it's cool.
like what I'm trying to do is not just machining or something. I feel like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a business system that works, that like I can continually focus on the new. I think on the BOM podcast, John Grimsmo was saying that he wanted to get to a point where he works on things that are new or that are broken. And
Yeah, I
yeah, I
like that a
love
lot
that.
too.
And so it's like, as long as I'm, setting up work stops and probe, manually jogging the probe in and setting up parallels and getting ready to run the next parts. And it takes, setting all the tools. Like I have a standard tool library now, which has been life changing. And anyway, like as long as you're doing setups all the time on these repeat parts that are coming up again later, it's just like then you're not doing that. And I guess you could hire somebody to do that, but that setup work is fairly skilled work, so you got to hire somebody you can really trust, and you got to pay them right. And I would like to minimize that as much as possible, so that whether it's just me or me and somebody else, that like we can always be focusing on like fixing new stuff. Like I'm trying to hire somebody, I want them not just to do the work, I want them to also help me build the system.
Right. Oh, totally. Yeah. So before we get to your new hire, which I definitely want to talk about,
Yeah.
let's talk about your move to Grand Rapids.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess before we leave the Haas, I'm trying to think if there's any other things that I should talk about. That I wanted to talk to you some about the 30 taper versus 40 taper thing, which we can do later, I guess. But that's always been interesting to me, like this super super fast machine or like a bigger machine. I think that's an interesting debate, and you and I'm curious to talk about that. But
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then so when you went to Saunders, because Molly No asked both about your
yeah,
Haas and about the Saunders course. Did he have Haas at that time, or was it all Tormach?
no, I didn't use them really. He had just gotten the VF2 SS, which I think was his second Haas, and he had the VM3 before that. But so when I went there, we did. It was like 2 days in a computer lab with Fusion, and we didn't really see John the whole time. He has Kevin Ellingson flies in from Fargo or somewhere and teaches
Oh
that
yeah,
class. He's
he's what Mech Advantage on
Yeah,
Instagram.
mechanical advantage, mech advantage, and he is
Yeah.
he's a great teacher. I think he offers like one-on-one stuff. So like if you need to learn about all that stuff related to CAD and CAM, really good person to reach out to or take a class with him or whatever. I recommend that. We didn't see John much at all the whole time. I think he was in Australia or something for most of it. But anyway, so like 2 days in the class with the computer lab, I always struggled to figure out how to get over the learning curve with Fusion. And then within like an hour and a half sitting in the computer lab, I was like, oh, I get it now. And it just kind of clicked. And, you get hung up on some little thing because it's kind of complicated in the beginning. You got to like, I don't know. It's just like, what the hell's the difference between a body and a component? I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, then you have somebody looking over your shoulder and they're like, oh, just do this. Like it's blah, blah, blah. And then you're on to the next thing. And so that really helped. And it was 2 days in the computer lab with CAD. And then it was 3 days with the Tormach making like a little speed handle for a Kurt Weiss and some other little project. And I was like, yeah, I can't believe they wouldn't teach me how to touch off tools. This is so easy, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
And then I did a 2 day fixturing class, which, I don't know, that was whatever. They did a fine job with that. I think the strength of the Saunders offerings, at least at that point, was all the computer stuff. Those guys, Kevin and John, and like, I think they embrace the technology and they're good at, computers and teaching that sort of thing. And so I really like that. From all the years of like dinking around with manual machining and stuff, I felt like I had a pretty good hold on like on fixturing. So they were showing us like mighty bite clamps and stuff, which is like, it's cool. Some of that stuff I hadn't seen, I guess. But anyway, yeah, it was a cool class. I learned a lot. I would recommend it to people. It's really not that much money for what it is. It can really turbocharge your growth into that world.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it.
But the space that I'm in, to return to that, is I had been in a couple different shops in. Well, I'm from Michigan, and I went to college in Michigan, and then I moved to Syracuse, New York when I was 23. Was dating somebody there, and then I just been there the last like 7.5 years, and it's a fine place, but I didn't really have a reason to be there. I wasn't like super in love with the climate or the location, and it didn't support industry that well. It's like kind of hard to get stuff anodized. Like in Syracuse, there's Anoplate, which is this massive, massive, massive company, and they sort of like I haven't seen Pretty Woman, but I think they kind of Pretty Womaned me when I went in there and tried to get some work done. They quoted me like $850, and I was like, oh god, I guess that's just what it costs. Man, this is expensive. Oh, and then I in desperation, because I was frustrated with them. I didn't know like how to make a PO or anything. I'm so new to this whole, I never ran a business. I don't know what a purchase order is. And so they wanted me to make them a purchase order, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, you know what? I'm just taking my parts. I'm going to pick them up, and I'm going to figure out some other place to anodize them because they were being jerks about the PO thing, like that I didn't. They're just all snobby, and then I got the next city over, Rochester, New York, like 90 miles over. I got them to give me a quote, and it was $130, and they did great work. And so for the next 2 years or whatever, I was just taking my parts to this, and I would ship the small orders, and I would drive the big ones. And anyway, being in Syracuse was great in a lot of ways, but they're just the support for industry was not so good. Like trying to get sawn like pre-cut material was really hard there. Even just trying to get material was. I didn't think the local material suppliers were very good. They didn't ever give me good prices, or they weren't that easy to deal with, and the anodizing sucked. And so anyway, my shop was way too small. It was like 400 square feet, and it was like half of that square footage was my VF4. And then I got a CNC lathe, and like it's just ridiculous how tight I had that shop uh, uh, packed. And
Yeah.
so I needed a different shop space. I didn't want to stay in that city. I had no reason to stay there at that point. So I was looking to maybe move out west or something would have been cool, but I didn't know where exactly, and it's expensive. And then I got family in Michigan, and I figured, if I moved back to Michigan would be cool. So I found this ridiculously nice warehouse space for rent in Jenison, Michigan, which is like in the burbs of Grand Rapids. And so I moved in here, and it's been awesome. It's really cool shop space. I've never seen a warehouse space that's like quite this nice. It's air conditioned. There's a power roll up door. There's heat, of course. There's like brick everywhere, so it looks nice, and the LED lights in the ceiling. And there's a bathroom with a shower.
Yeah, I've big shop envy. Like the pictures you posted of it, it really is like a gorgeous space. Um, Much more like what I would expect some kind of fancy clothes brand to like
Yeah,
set up in more than a shop.
yeah. Yeah, it's nice. The guys in the next unit over is like a contractor or something, and they use it as like a showroom for their model kitchens and offices for their, you know, people. And they don't do any industrial stuff in there, but it looks great. And there's different people in the different. There's 8 units here, so I mean, if anybody cool wants to come and move in next door and be my neighbor and start another machine shop, then I'll let you know when there's a vacancy. But it's like $1450 a month for 1,500 square feet, and it's nice. And the only complaint I have is that it's in the suburbs of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's not. It's like a 20-minute drive from the cool part of town where I live. But whatever. Anyway.
That's still, yeah. I mean, that's a great price and really not too bad of a location. It sounds like.
Yeah, and I was very very clear with them that I could not afford to make the mistake of moving in and then find out that they didn't really have three-phase, because they had told me they had three-phase, and at some point they said that they had 200 amps. And so I before I signed the lease, I had the guy, like their electrician came over, and they confirmed it is 208-volt three-phase, and I'm like, okay. And then I get here and I see that it's 100 amps. And then I referred to my email where I made sure to get it in writing. And I guess he had confirmed that it was 208 volts of three-phase. And he didn't at that point say that it was 200 amps. So I guess that's my fault for not being careful. 100 amps, from what I can tell from all the people I've talked to, should be plenty for all the stuff that I want to do in here. I think if you packed it full of machines and you ran, really hard, then like, yeah, you could run out of power. But I don't think that's going to happen. I feel like I'm pretty safe here for a while. Eventually, I'll probably buy my own space, like a pole barn or something on my own property, or who knows. But this should be good for quite a while.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know before you moved, like you had asked on the podcast a few times, and we talked a few times over DM about shop space because you were, like you said, bursting at the seams at your old shop. So it's it's
Yeah.
it's
I
really
think
cool
I
that you
had
found
said to
something real
you
quick.
something like, could you guys talk about space sometime? That would be interesting. And you're like, I don't know what to say about it. Like, what's to say about it? And I said, if I was doing a podcast about machining, I feel like it'd be half about space.
Right.
Because it's
Right.
like, I mean, at that point, I was feeling especially squished and frustrated about it. But it really is. And somebody was asking that recently to you guys, but like, it's hard to find the smaller size spaces, and it's hard to commit to a lot at first when you're trying to like strike out and get going. So unless you have your own garage or something or your own pole barn, it's really hard. And I think once you have it, you kind of forget about the crisis of it. But like when you're looking, it's so hard to find anything decent. And this one is amazing because it's year to year. You only need to sign for 1 year, but like a lot of places, they want you to sign for 3 or 5 years, and it's just it's a nightmare to think about that sort of
Yeah.
commitment when you're just getting started and all you need is some thick concrete and some three phase,
Yeah, yeah. I think that at the time, well, I mean, still, I didn't have much of a opinion on it because, like, we just lucked into the place we had. Like, we bought a machine before we had space and just kind of had to find a place. And like
Yeah.
this one was on Craigslist and it had what we needed. It's not ideal, but it's cheap. And,
Yeah.
you know, it was like, I don't know what to tell you besides like, good luck. Like, um,
Yeah.
and like it sounds like you have a great deal. Cause like I've looked locally and the next space we looked at was, I want to say it was 15 or 1600 square feet, and it was like almost 2 grand a month. And it
Yeah.
didn't have AC. It was all swamp cooled still, and I mean, it had an AC like front office. Like I think half of that was offices in the front, or a third of that. But yeah, it sounds like you got a really smoking deal. So that's great.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I didn't, I think we tend to be practical people, like makers and machinists and whatever. And so I would never go shopping for a place with it being nice as a high priority, like, oh, it's got to be nice. And this place is nice. And anyway, when I posted pictures to my Instagram of like, I'm moving, here's what the new shop looks like, people just saw it and they like their eyes lit up and they're like, oh my God. And like everybody's like jealous of me or happy for me or some combination of the two. And I sold a lot of stuff that week. And I don't know exactly what that lesson is, but I think I mean, I'm not saying that I want to lean into this and this is going to, but whatever. But it's like when you project success, and I think that's what people were seeing was that like I was apparently successful and like whatever, it means something to people. They like it gives them an affinity for you that they want some of what you have, or they oh, this person's successful. Let me like be friends with or do business with this person who's I don't. It's weird, but it's not. I guess it's not all bad. I just like I don't want that to guide my I don't want that to be the quest that I'm on is to make people jealous of me or something, but it serves a little bit of utility to like to like versus like when I was in this dark cramped little shop, like nobody ever came and visited me. And now people want to come all the time, and I'm like, yeah, bring your mask, whatever, like I'll show you around the shop. And maybe that's geography, but yeah, I don't know. It's different. It's a whole different level when you have a shop that looks nice, and just having space is so powerful. Like to be able to work on something without having to move 10 other things out of the way first is so valuable.
Oh yeah, yeah, completely. I mean, it. I guess it makes sense, you know, like you want to go over to your friends that have the nice house because it's a nice house, and
Yeah.
like it's the same kind of thing with a shop. You're like, oh, it's a good looking shop, and I want to go check it out. So
Yeah.
it's the unfortunate reality of being human, I guess.
Yeah. It's weird. There's some deep psychological lesson there that like I think in business, especially like if you sell a product directly to your customer, like I do, I think it's important to like to have a certain level of confidence and a certain level of success or something or perceived success because like it's like you're not just buying the product, it's like you're buying a little bit of like that person's aura or something, or I don't know exactly, but anyway, it's like it's to feel like you get all the good ideas that this person put into their product, it's coming from this person who also knows how to like succeed or something. It's I don't know, it's this weird little nugget in there somewhere about business.
Oh yeah, well, and I think that you do a great job of putting your face on your social media and stuff. Like I know that I went to the M Hub talk that both Grimsmo and Saunders um, and Pearson did at like two IMTSs ago, and like one big lesson I learned from all of their speeches was like, especially Grimsmo, like nobody gave a shit about his brand until he turned the camera around and like it was a person that they wanted to, like you said, be friends with or do business with or buy a part of, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you do a great job of that on your stories and stuff. Like I always listen to your stuff while I'm at work and I'm like, oh man, I want to see what Joe's getting up to today. Like what problems is he facing or whatever. And so
Yeah.
it's a really big thing in social media is like, you know your work might be the best in the world, but if they don't have a face to connect to, they just won't care.
Yeah, so I do a podcast, and I try to do it every week, and I've been bad the last 6 months. But anyway, I interview people who do bike frame building or people who are in the bike industry, and I've gotten to do some really kind of like titans of industry. It makes me feel really proud of that. And one of my favorite interviews that I ever did was with Ross Schaefer. And so he started Salsa Cycles in 1983, and he ran it until 1997, and then he sold it. So a lot of people would be aware of Salsa Cycles. But anyway, he built that company, which is cool. And he's just the coolest guy. He's in like Northern California, and he has an old Matsura 510 from the 80s in his garage. And he said I inspired him to get a VF2, so or I was part of inspiring him. But anyway, he's getting a new VF2. He makes pedal steel guitars, which is the coolest thing in the world. Like a really beautiful instrument, and he makes like the nicest ones on the planet. But anyway, when I had him on my podcast, he was talking about with something he learned in the bike industry. He's like you want people to want some of what you have. Like you want, I don't know. It's I feel like there's a lot of wisdom to that one little thing. You want people to want some of what you have. It's like if you have this brand that's like fun and it's like cool, and like we adventure or we do whatever it is that we do that the brand is about, like you want it to be something that like when people are buying the product, they're also buying some of the lifestyle or something.
Yeah,
And
no, I completely agree.
I see that with some of the bike builders who do it well. It's like they'll post pictures of the gorgeous bikes that they're selling, but it's like don't be fooled. It's not just the bike. It's like it's also like the beautiful western landscape behind the bike. Like it's like it implies that you're not just buying the bike, you're buying your like lift ticket or something so that you can live that life of being like, out in the mountains and like riding your bike all the time. And it's like don't fool yourself. You're buying a bike, but yeah, it's like it's part of that, you're selling people more than just the thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lifestyle brand, I guess.
Yeah, sort of. It's like the equipment that helps you live the life that you aspire to live.
Right, exactly. So sharp right turn. Let's
Yep.
also talk about your lathe. We had a few questions about that as well. Split 141 asked if you liked your lathe, and if you had to buy another one, what would you buy? Um, Easton asked, how are you becoming a lathe guy, and how much better they are than mills. Let's kind of go down that route. What lathe do you have? What inspired you to get it, and then where are you taking it?
Yeah. So let me just say this: I crashed my lathe the other day. I didn't post about that, but I think it's going to be fine. But yeah, that was kind of funny that I did that. I intentionally set. I have a system where I keep the three jaw chuck on always, and the face of the chuck is Z0, and so no matter what part I run, like I don't need to set the work offset. And I was rerunning an old template in Fusion, and I had my hand on the knob for the speed override, and I just wasn't quick enough. So,
Oh no.
so I realigned the turret the other day. I think I got that dialed in, and then I need to cut something and measure for taper to see if the spindle or if the headstock got twisted out of alignment. And I think I understand how to realign that if I have to. But it wasn't a terrible crash. But anyway, definitely knocked the turret out of position. So
Yikes.
yeah, it comes with the territory. I'm surprised that in the last couple of years I've had as little crashes and stuff as I've had. It's been pretty good actually. But the machine I have, it's a 1996 again, same year as my old mill was. 1996 Clousing Storm 100A. And so it's got a 42 millimeter through bore. I have a like a 5.5 inch 3-jaw chuck, and I also have a 16C collet chuck. And if anybody wants a A25 16C collet chuck and a bunch of 16C collets, hit me up. I might be willing to sell that. I don't use it. But anyway, it's a sweet lathe. I really do like it. It's got a Fanuc OTC control, or the OT control, and
Hmm.
it's so basic. It does not have work shifts, and it has all these weird, like, it doesn't have a bunch of the canned cycles, and like G92 is some other number, and I had to do a bunch of post processor edits to get the thing to even run. But now it's awesome. Like, the cool thing about these old Fanuc machines is that, like, they're so unuser friendly, and it takes you forever to figure out the most basic stuff. But then once you do, there's like nothing to it. There's like 3 screens, and, like, you load the program and you hit start and it goes. And, like, there's just, once you learn how to do 4 things, like, that's all you ever need to know. And God help you if you need to troubleshoot a problem, but, like, it's just so basic. Like, there's not much going on there.
Yeah,
My
totally.
issue with that machine is just that the work that I do, I should be on a machine that's like a size or two bigger. I need a through bore that's like 2 inches or 2.5 inches, but I can only pass 1 5/8 bar through the spindle. And so I've considered upgrading some parts on it, because the spindle bore itself is 2.4 inches. And so if I got a different actuator and a different chuck and a different draw tube, I could actually pass a 2 inch bar through there. But that's a big project, and I'm not sure that I want to deal with that. And it doesn't have a touch setter, doesn't have a chip conveyor, doesn't have a um, parts catcher. And so those are all things that I would really like to have. And I've considered just trying to run this for another 6 months or a year, and then just getting like an old Daewoo, or who knows what, something. I had always wanted to get a Morisiki. I did actually, a year ago. I bought a Morisiki SL0 on eBay, and it was in Boston. And I drove out to just like inspect it in person, and then I was going to come back the next weekend with a trailer. And it just wasn't really what the guy said it was. And he, like, apologized. He's like, I thought it was running better, and, like, it had some alarm he couldn't figure out how to clear, and it just didn't look so sharp. And so he refunded me or whatever, and I never took that home. But the for anyone who doesn't know the Morisiki SL0, it's the cutest lathe in history. It looks like a phone booth, and it's bigger than a phone booth, but not a whole lot bigger. And it's got like a 5C size. I think you can pass like a 1 1/8 bar through the spindle or something, and really small travels. But it's incredibly rigid for its size, and it's just, it's built really, really well. And the people who I know who've owned them and ran them have only good things to say about them. So
Well, yeah, I think Jeff had one, and then that
yeah,
one has been like passed around to like every
yeah,
maker in the
Zodiac,
Bay
and
Area.
yeah,
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 it seems
they're
like a
sweet.
cool lathe though.
Yeah, I really wanted one, but it's just, what I need is like something that, yeah, it's just bigger. I need, and I've considered buying a new lathe maybe, and just taking on payments sometime in the next year. Like, I don't know. I like my Haas mill a lot. I don't have any regrets, except on the Haas mill, I would get the better chip conveyor, and I would get the 50 tool changer, because the chip conveyor on it, I got the single auger. That thing is garbage. I hate it. And then the tool changer, when you do a standard tool library like I do, the 30+1 sidearm tool changer, you can't do the standard tool library with an umbrella, in my opinion, but you can with a sidearm tool changer. But if you go from the 30 pocket to the 50 pocket, then you really don't. It really just opens up a lot of potential to not be touching off tools ever. So I kind of wish I had that. When I think about lathes, I'm not sure that I would get a Haas lathe. And I think the biggest factor there is just that they're loud. Like, whenever you watch a video of a Haas lathe, the spindle has this high pitched kind of whine to it. And my first mill was so loud, I just don't want to do that again. Like, I know it's not as loud, but I want a quieter machine if I'm going to spend that kind of money for a new machine.
Yeah, I think when you work every day right next to your machines and it's your whole life, like you value quiet. I mean, we just bought a new compressor,
Yeah.
not because we needed more air, but because I wanted something silent. So
Yeah, I bought a Kaiser when I moved into this shop, and I didn't really want to spend that much money and to get like a super high end compressor. But the more I looked at it, it's like, well, if I want something kind of quiet, you can get like the Eastwood Scroll, and those are a little bit more of a question mark. And then you can spend like 5 grand and you can get something that's like probably solid. But the only brand that I never heard anybody say anything too bad about was Kaiser. It seemed like every other brand, like, somebody was griping about this, or they had a bad experience here or there. And I'm sure that, I probably have a very small sample size of opinions, but and the Kaisers are just, made in Germany. They have that mystique. Like, I felt like if I was going to spend that kind of money, might as well just spend a little bit more and get the whatever. But yeah, it's amazing having a quiet compressor.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think our new one should be here Monday or Tuesday, and it was supposed to be here Friday, but I think it got caught up in whatever big storm you guys are having out east. So,
Yeah,
um, I can't wait. I am
that's so cool.
so ready to not hear my compressor turn on and like pound the air for however long it takes.
Yeah. Um, on my lathe, a couple more notes about that, I guess. It's pretty sweet. I've been able to get good surface finishes. I think there's something wonky with the X axis, but it seems to hold size pretty good. So I guess I'm not going to tear into that unless I need to. And yeah, it's pretty good. I would recommend it to people. The hydraulic pump is a little bit loud, but it's a pretty sweet machine. And oh, and it's got VDI 30 tool holders. Those are sweet. You can like take them out and put them back in. They're super repeatable. So if you have like a drill or a boring bar that might get in the way for a certain part, you can just take it out and set it somewhere else. And then when you need it again, you can put it back in and you don't, like a lot of tool holders on lathes aren't going to work that way. So
Yeah, totally. That's really handy. I mean, and especially for an older lathe,
yeah,
it sounds like you're optimizing the best you can.
I'm trying to.
Well, very cool. I guess the other questions we had, like you said, Thomas Hosford asked about rigging machines into your old shop with his dad.
Yeah, no, with my dad. Yeah, it was
Oh,
crazy. I I always moved my own machines, and they started off smaller, like a Bridgeport and stuff. And I got a rigging quote on that, and it was going to be like almost as much money on all those machines to rig them to my shop as it was to buy them. So I was like, that's crazy. And I figured out how to move them, and it's not so hard to move a Bridgeport. I made a YouTube video about moving a Bridgeport. Actually, like you block it up, and then you use a pallet jack, and it's not too hard to move one of those on a rented trailer. And then when it came to move this torque cut machine, it's 6,500 pounds. And I didn't even, it's not like it was in my shop and I had to figure out how to move it. It was like, it was 400 miles away or whatever. And I had to figure out how to move it. And I couldn't take measurements. But anyway, I rented a trailer from Sunbelt Rentals and it was a tilt bed trailer. And then I rented a F-250 from Enterprise, which was like 450 bucks for the weekend. So I didn't have my truck back then. And then my dad came from Michigan for the weekend, and we got up at like 6 in the morning, and we drove to Connecticut, and they loaded this machine on the trailer, and then we drove back to New York, and we backed it into my shop, and we had to slide the machine off of this tilt bed trailer, and it didn't want to slide, and I was afraid to put wheels under it. I had made these like wheels that I could roll it on, but I didn't want to put those under it and then have it like roll off the trailer. And so we used like a come along and we were like sliding it down, and then we had like a bottle jack and we were like jacking it like 3 inches at a time, and it took hours, but we did slide it off of the trailer and we got it into my shop, and I didn't have to pay riggers. So that was, it was pretty cool. Like when you pull off a project like that and it actually works, it feels pretty good.
oh yeah, yeah. And it sounds as sketchy as it might have been. The guy we had this like '85 Kittimer that we bought that was needed a lot of work, and we bought it and thought like, oh, this will be our second machine. Um, and when we sold it, the guy who he paid to rig it had a drop deck trailer and just used Harbor Freight winches and just literally yanked this thing across the floor
Yeah.
onto the trailer. And it was so sketchy because he's just like, jacking up one corner at a time with this big long pry bar and yanking it with this thing. And he's like, oh, yeah, I just use these winches until they die. And then I go trade it in for another one. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, man, whatever, whatever you want to do, just don't break my building. Like you can break the machine all you want. It's not mine anymore.
Yeah. The when I got the Haas, I finally had to hire riggers to move that into my shop because that one's like 14,000 pounds, and because I didn't really own it, it's like I'm on payments, and so like I can't risk that. Like I can't have $100,000 machine that I need to pay off get like dropped or something. So anyway, I hired riggers, and it was $4,600 to have them pick it up off the trailer and bring it into my shop and set it down. And I think that's partly because my old shop there was like it just didn't have very good access, and like the ground was soft, so they had to bring plates and all that.
Yeah, and they had you over a barrel because
Yeah,
what else are you gonna do?
and then to move from New York to Michigan, I hired riggers again. So they moved my old lathe, the '96 lathe, and the VF4, and then I have these four, Lista cabinets. And just to move all that stuff, the two riggers and the trucking company was $10,500, and it's just
Oof.
Yeah, it's brutal, but it's like I don't know. I was kind of bracing for that. I sort of knew when I bought the Haas. I didn't know that I wanted to stuff it in that tiny shop because I knew I was going to be moving again at some point. But I wanted the machine and I wasn't ready to move yet. I hadn't figured out where I would go next, and I was paying $300 a month in that shop, and so I was like, I could move somewhere, and now my rent is going to like quintuple or more or something, or I can just get this machine and then, like the break even is like 6 months, like the difference in rent versus the cost of rigging it in, like my break even point is like 6 months. So I might as well just move it into this small shop and then figure out where I'm going to move later. And so I did. But to think back that I spent, like over $15,000 in rigging in 12 months is just hurts.
Yeah, it's painful for sure. Yeah, it seems like riggers just kind of pull a number out of thin air, and they're like, "Well, this is what you can pay, or you can find somebody else." And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, great, thanks.
I got multiple quotes for that one that was $4,600, and they were within like $300 of each other. And it's like I think the one guy called the other guy and asked if he had quoted me. Like I think they're conspiring here. I think because I'm just small potatoes, they're like installing bridges and all this stuff. Like they don't want to screw around with you.
Yeah, yeah. It, it does seem like kind of a racket sometimes. Um, oh, and then Easton asked 3 reasons that I should replace the kitty with a lathe.
Yeah, you should do it. Lathes are cool because I mean, have you run a lathe much at work?
A little bit. Like I think I spoke about it a little bit on here, but the first job they stuck me on the lathe was a 13-inch diameter donut of 17.4 on an
Yeah.
8-inch chuck. So I had to like make special jaws that really like I called Kitagawa and they were like, "Oh yeah, we recommend you like cut no more than 9 inches in diameter or like 8.5 inches in diameter on this 8-inch chuck." And I'm like, "Well, I can't. So thanks. Have a great day." And
Yeah.
so yeah, it was sketchy, but it all worked out. And so like it was a real trial by fire. It
Yeah.
was hardened steel already, way bigger than the chuck should have been. Tool clearances sucked, but it was still a lot of fun. And like now, I definitely feel a lot more confident, taking on a small aluminum job or something like that.
Yeah. My favorite is on Instagram is Pete Florio. I don't know if you know him. He has a Morisiki SL35, and he's just this I don't know like 50-year-old dude who just has these old machines, and he just loves the work. He just makes all these like mechanical seals or whatever and shafts and things all the time, and he's just like really really good at. I think he manually programs at the machine. I just love seeing that he always does these beautiful like Instagram chip of the week things, but just I don't know anybody who just loves the work itself nearly as much as him. Because he's like it seems like he's doing kind of the same stuff, but he just loves it. Like he's not I don't know that he's always trying to do something new, but anyway.
Didn't follow him, but I just followed him. Yeah, it looks like some cool stuff.
He looks like the little Instagram picture of him, the thumbnail. He looks like Kevin Costner in that. But I imagine if you zoom in, that's probably not what his face really looks like. I just like to imagine that he is Kevin Costner.
Yeah, he's just researching a role. That's what it is.
Yeah. Um, Yeah. So lathes are sweet though because they're really productive, and that's the thing I'm always trying to explain to people, like in the frame building world, especially who are interested in CNC, and they're like, maybe I'll get a CNC lathe or a CNC mill someday, and I'm like, well, yeah, like a CNC mill will allow you to make complicated things, and it will allow you to make many of them, but like a CNC lathe. A lot of times you can get that done on a manual lathe. It depends what you're doing, but the beauty of a CNC lathe is just so freaking productive, and like especially if you can bar pull stuff, it's amazing. So like a lot of my stuff, I would love to have a subspindle live tool lathe, but I realized that since I design all my own parts, I can usually get it done with a 2-axis lathe. I can just make the round features and then I can build some sort of fixture or soft jaws on the mill and I can finish it. And so with the 4th axis on the mill, I can hit multiple sides of the part and I can put a chamfer if there's like a pip from parting or something. It's a really good combo. So far, it seems to be working really well for me. That it's like you're not asking a whole lot of the lathe at that point.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like for what you're doing, it sounds like you've really nailed down what you need, and I'm sure your next lathe purchase will be no
Yeah,
more machine than you really need.
yeah. What I want now, this is my dream lathe, is like a circa 2000 Daewoo Lynx with the LC model, the 220 LC or whatever, with with the larger bar capacity. Those will take like a 2.6-inch bar. So if anybody's sitting on one of those and they got like the chip conveyor and they got the parts catcher, let me know.
Yeah, we have a few Daewoo and Doosan lathes at work, and they're nothing but bulletproof. Like I know I've heard bad things about their mill turns from Jake Yates and different things about their mills. I've never been. Their iron is fantastic for their mills, but anyway,
Yeah,
their lathes have been nothing but 100% bulletproof.
yeah, for sure. Um, what's next?
Well, we can get into 30 versus 40 taper discussion. It
Yeah,
sounds
that
like.
was one thing I wanted to ask you. For what I do, I'm curious to hear your opinion on this. I see a lot of people getting like speedios and stuff, and I think those machines are so sexy and so cool. And just to me, like the fast rapids are just mesmerizing and they're exciting. They put you in this shop environment where you feel like excited about what you're doing. It's kind of thrilling. You feel like stuff's really happening. And like my old machine, the rapids were 350 or something inches per minute. It's really slow, and so it's just you just feel like you take your time, and so it's kind of cool. But for what I'm doing, it's like all I really want is to be able to run the machine unattended for as long as possible. And so I actually made and I printed out and I stuck it on the wall. It says programming objectives to remind me. And I said, first thing is great parts. The second thing is longer walkaway time. The third thing is minimal machine setup. The fourth thing is multi-axis. The fifth thing is, more finished parts per cycle, greater process reliability, easily editable programs, so I don't need to start from scratch when I go to make a tweak. Intuitive or foolproof process. I want in-process probe inspection, so I don't need to be measuring stuff as much afterwards. Greater tool life, and then at the very bottom of the list of programming objectives, I put reduced cycle time. And I feel like this is truly reflective of like what I'm trying to do is that the cycle time is just not the highest priority. Like all those other things are kind of more important to me so that I can just keep the machine running. Because, I'm also packaging stuff and designing things and talking to customers. And so, like that's what I see as being one of the biggest strengths of a machine like that is it's just fast as blazes. Like, and I think they're really beautiful and well-made machines, but like, what's your take on that? To me, it seems like with a really fast 30 taper machine, the idea is that you just kind of stand in front of it and then every 1 minute the part is done or something and you advance it. But like, what has been your experience? Do you feel like you do have to babysit it a lot or do you get many longer cycles?
Um, so I think it really depends on the work you're kind of doing. Like for you, you're doing production of known parts. So you do want well, and you're only one person. Like if you had a helper, you would want to reduce those cycle times so you can make more parts per day, or maybe you would. But like
Yeah.
for you, a longer cycle time and more process reliability makes the most sense for your current situation.
Yeah.
And like for me, shorter cycle times make maybe not the most sense. Like I still want process reliability and I need dead nuts parts every time. But like I'm doing quick turn prototype work. So like I had repeat work that went from the kitty to the brother and shaved 40% off
Yeah.
without
That's
touching
awesome.
it. It was just rapids and tool changes.
And you don't
Um,
even have that fast of a spindle. You're usually like 10K.
yeah, mine's a 10K high torque. And so like it was not at all cutting time that was decreased. It was just,
Yeah.
just rapids and just tool changes.
That's crazy.
Um, so it for me that makes a lot of sense because it's like for me I'm setting up 5 ops a day and there's 3 parts in each op and I just need to get them done. And so it's like every little bit that I can save is great. Granted, I do like longer cycle times too. Like I had a part this weekend that ran for an hour and 40 minutes, and I was like, man, I've got so much time. I can clean, I can program the next op, I can do this, I can do that, and like
Yeah.
it's all nice. So I think it's just different strokes for different folks, kind of thing. Like there's definitely benefits to both of them. Like the speedos are nice, and 30 taper is nice because it's a lot cheaper. Like tool holders are, even from Mari tool are what 30-40 bucks cheaper a piece. Um, and just the consumables in general are a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Uh, but I can't swing a giant 3/4 inch end mill 3.5 inches deep with super big confidence.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put that even on the dual contact. I wouldn't like. I would do it if I absolutely had to, but man, I would prefer not to if I can help it. Like 40 taper
Yeah.
definitely has its place for hogging, and like Brad and I, my business partner, have talked about that. Like I think our next machine will probably be another brother, but we've also looked at like an Akuma or something like that because it'd be nice to have something that we could just really swing a big end mill or a big face mill or something like that and really hog some chips off every now and again.
Yeah. So riddle me this: Haas versus Brother or other machine tool builders. I remember you were saying a couple weeks ago something about with the deals. Somebody asked if you would ever buy Haas or something, and you said you probably wouldn't. And I mean, I have my own reservations about Haas, and I know a lot of people. Some people just don't like Gene personally. Some people feel like they don't have a very good build quality reputation. I mean, do you care to get into any of those things about like what it is that would keep you from ever wanting to have a Haas?
So I've run quite a few Haas's, and personally, I just don't find them as rigid as they should be. Your
Yeah,
mill's 14,000 pounds, and I've run 35 taper or 30 taper Kitamuras that were just as rigid as a VF4.
yeah,
Um, and I don't know. I think like there is a place for both of them, definitely. I don't know. Personally, I just like for me, the Brother. I wanted something that like I would never have to see my service tech unless I had to. And like a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, Haas has such great service," and it's like I would like I have great service through Yamazin, and I love my techs through Yamazin, but like we've had the machine a year now, and I've never had them out for a single thing. And
yeah,
like I don't anticipate seeing them. Like if this machine can run in China for 5 years straight with zero maintenance and zero shits given about it, I know that it's going to last me 10 plus years with almost no like almost no service calls and pretty decent maintenance. So
yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I really understand the Haas like attractiveness though too. Like it, like you said, the pricing's all right there. They have great deals. They have great prices. The control is like by far the most user friendly in the world.
Yeah.
Uh,
I wish
so
that other machine tool builders would get off their asses and like market better because I think like when you're a prospective buyer and you're kind of interested in what somebody has to offer, I mean for me anyway, it's like you just want to drool for a while and you want to like study up and you want to learn and you want to imagine like what is it really going to be like every day firing this thing up and using it. And Haas makes it so easy to get a picture of what that's going to be like and feel like and work like. And then all these other ones, it's such a big question mark. And some of them have a little bit more literature resources than others. I know when I talked to the Doosan sales guys, they did mail me this or email me this like PDF that had, the DNM 4500 in that series. Had a bunch more specs, and it was pretty cool. Like to see the naked machine, just like the casting, and I'm like, holy shit, this thing is like their DNM 4500, which is like the VF2 travel equivalent. It's like 11,000 pounds. I think a VF2 is like 7,500 pounds. It's it's a
yeah,
lot more iron, and the base of it is like a more of a pyramid shape. It's like way wider footprint, and it's awesome. Like that's cool. I'm sure that any of the issues that you'd have with the low memory size of the Fanic can probably be overcome, but it's just a lot. It's a bigger question mark next to the idea of buying it. And it's not that I wouldn't give it a chance. It's just like they're not making the case for themselves. They're doing a really bad job at advocating for themselves. It's like they want you to do your own research or something. And anyway, it's just it was just too easy with Haas, and they run too good of deals. And now that I have that, and standardization is important, that like if I ever run out of spindle hours on this machine, I'm just going to buy the same exact thing again with the better chip conveyor and the 50 tool changer. I'm like I'll have the same arrangement of vices and the same Pearson pallet and rotary, and like because the standardization is key to be able to run the same program on either machine. So now I feel like I'm kind of I
locked
would
in.
at least need to get another machine with the same travels, the same max RPM, and the same side mount tool changer. Like it
Yeah,
need
totally.
have to be a side mount. But
Yeah,
I
and I think I don't want to discount Haas at all. Like I think they do the full life cycle of the machine better than anybody else. Like you said, you can drool over it, you can learn it beforehand on their YouTube channel. You can, I mean, now you can buy tooling and work holding through
yeah
them. They make financing easy because it's all through them. They make pricing easy because it's all through them, and open and all that stuff. So I think that like I totally understand why people buy
yeah
Haas's, and like
for
I
sure.
think that they work. They just make parts.
Yeah, no, it's been good, and yet I'm not really a Haas fanboy or anything, but yeah, I have one.
Right. And it
um,
makes you money, and that's what matters
you
really when it
know,
comes down to it.
you know Devin who does Lycan Precision,
Yeah, yeah, we've been
Lycan
talking a lot
MFG.
lately.
Yeah, because he has two brothers now. But anyway, he had gotten his first Speedio at least a couple months before I got my Haas, and I was talking because he's in the bike world, and I was talking to him on the phone about this stuff, and he was making the case for why he didn't get a Haas, but he had thought about it. And then he's like, "But at the end of the day, you can make money on any of these machines. Like it's hard to go wrong. Like they have strengths and weaknesses, and whatever you want, like you'll probably figure out how to make money on it. And if you can't, then you probably weren't going to make money on a different one.
Yeah, yeah. And really, I think it just comes down to what experiences you have with each brand. We had already had the old brother, and our Yamazon office like came out and serviced it and installed the card for free when we bought it. Like
Yeah,
because like they even said to me, he was like, I can't expect you to buy another brother if we don't at least support the one that you have, even if you didn't buy it from us. And I was like,
yeah,
you got me hooked. Like that's exactly what I want to hear from a service perspective. So
yeah. So shout out to Clousing Industrial in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo is just the next city over. They're like an hour drive from me here. And I remember I reached out to them years ago because I had a Clousing manual lathe. And so I asked about parts once or twice. But anyway, now that I got this CNC lathe from them from 1996, uh, I was so worried that I was going to lose the parameters from a dead battery on this old FANUC control. And I was just really trying to get the machine powered up so that then I could figure out how to save the parameters. And it had these key sheet membranes over the keyboards that were like total garbage. And so I had also bought some replacement, like little membrane stickers that you stick over the keyboards. And I bought a cheap one because from FANUC they're like $140, and then there's $10 on eBay for the same thing. And so I just bought the $10 one on eBay and I carefully stuck it on, and it didn't fit perfect. And then I flip on the machine, and the machine was all weird. And like anyway, the reset key was being held down by this crappy key membrane, and it wiped my freaking parameters. And that was like the
uh-huh.
next thing on my to-do list was to back up the parameters. And I was so frustrated with myself that I let that happen. And so now I had this 25-year-old machine with no parameters, and I'm like, oh God, help me. And I called up Clousing, and they were awesome. And I guess that's the point of the story: is don't do that with the key sheet membranes. And also, Clousing is great, and I would not hesitate to buy a cold saw or a manual mill or any of the things that they sell nowadays. I don't know where all that stuff's made or the build quality necessarily, but the service that I've experienced multiple times on the phone has been really, really good. And I called them and I said, now that I live in Michigan, like, could I get one of you guys to come out here if I need help with this? And they said, oh yeah, sure. So yeah, I would
That's
not
pretty amazing.
hesitate to buy another old Clousing for that reason. I think Jeff was saying that his dad had the Clousing VMC in their shop there.
Hmm.
So I don't know what their service experience has been like, but yeah, mine has been really good.
Yeah. Well, and going back to your point earlier of like buying an older VMC versus like something like a Tormach, like I've always been a big proponent of that as well, but I think that you definitely have to like reach out to the company prior and find out what kind of service they have. Like I've loved Kitamura. Like the first shop I worked in had I don't know 12 or 15 of them or something like that. But like they do free phone and email service for the life of the machine, like for whoever owns it for forever. And then same with Yaskawa, who owns Yaznak for our Kitamura. That's the control, and like they do free phone and email troubleshooting. And so, like, having that kind of backing, like, yeah, we had to fix a lot of things ourselves, but you know what? I knew that if I really got into a bind, I could contact somebody and they'd help me figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's super helpful.
So I want to make a point about going full time because I want because this has been on your mind and it's always kind of on my mind. And anyway, I'll tell the story here. I was working at that job for 9 months, the machine shop, and maybe I'm just a millennial brat and I don't want to work and whatever. But anyway, I just got tired of not having any opportunity to like learn and grow there. And so I told the president of the company that like I wanted some more opportunities or else I was going to have to leave. And then I talked to him the next week and nothing had happened. And then the third week I gave him my 2 weeks notice. But anyway, it was kind of scary to like quit that because who knows what's going to happen. And anyway, I did, and it was like clearly one of the best decisions in my entire life. That and like buying an old machine and starting to do it was the best thing ever. And I look at the last nearly 3 years that I've been doing what I do now, and there's just no way that I mean, I just would have been working myself crazy to make even a quarter of the progress. And in my life, I think nothing makes me feel like happier and better about where I'm at than just seeing that things are moving and I'm making progress. And so like, yeah, I don't know. I just like what I was doing was living as cheap as I could and just doing it full time. And that was a really good recipe for me. And now like I can afford to do it a little bit more expensively if I have to, or I don't need to be so cheap about everything. But my friend Austin in town here, he has my old Bridgeport torque cut, and he talks about that sort of thing sometimes. Like it'd be cool to do something full time for himself. And I just I just always think it's like, man, you're starting your own work at like 40 at hour 41. Like every week, you got to get all the other 40 hours in before you can really start doing your own thing. And it's just hard, man. It's like you want to. I mean, think about having work life balance ever. And another thing that I think about too, and I don't have work life balance, but it's COVID. Like, what else am I going to do? I'm in a new city. Like, might as well just work all the time. But another thing is that your fixed overhead isn't going to change. Like the cost of your shop and the cost of your machine payment. They're like, that's not going to change. But your ability to like promise someone a faster lead time, that goes up. Your ability to like take it more seriously and maybe update this part of your website, and maybe like figure out this shipping thing that's been eating a bunch of time, like all those things just go up. uh, yeah, I don't know. I would encourage you to do what's right for you, but also that I think you've probably been ready for a while, and I think once you get there, you're going to say, I can't believe it took so long.
Yeah, well, and it's really funny. Like some of your points, like so. Just before we started recording, so everybody knows, we were talking about this, and I've got a good friend that owns another business, sort of in manufacturing, but not a machinist or anything like that. And we talk weekly about business and about things that we can both do better. And he really came down on me this last week about going full time, and he's really been pushing me for a long time. But really, like this last week was laying out some strong points, and a lot of them are what you just said. My fixed expenses stay the same. I only have to make X number of dollars per week more to afford myself working there full time. And he was like, "What's the likelihood that you can make that much more every week?" And I was like, "Oh, 90% probably." And he was
Yeah.
like, "Okay." And he's like, "Worst case, like what happens if you fail?" And I was like, "I don't know. We sell all the machines and close up shop." And he's like, "And then what?" I was like, "I guess I find another job." He's like, "Yeah, and how hard will that be?" And like at that point, you'll have owned your own shop, so now you're on the management track. And he's like, the costs or the potential pitfalls are so low compared to the benefits.
Yeah.
And so it really opened my eyes. And what it really opened my eyes to is like I have been saying for years now, like, oh, another year or two, and I'll go full time. But I never like gave it any thought. Like that was just, I guess, my blow off answer. And now that like I'm committed to myself, like I think in the next 8 to 10 months, I will be full time at Prodium.
Dude, just two
Um,
weeks notice tomorrow. Just get some skin in the game. Just
yeah,
jump out of the plane and build the parachute on the way down.
what I told him is like if it was just me in the business and it was just me, like I didn't have a fiance, like I would probably do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
I would jump in with both feet. But like now that I've got some other people that I have to not
Yeah.
convince, like they're both very supportive of like I told Brad this like the day after I had this conversation with my friend, and he was like, "Yeah, that sounds right." He's like, "We're in a catch-22 right now. Like we're never going to make enough money that it feels super confident you going full time without you going full time."
Yeah, no, I
Um,
think you just need to do it. But I mean, I feel like my risk profile was that like I could afford to take that kind of risk without losing much. I wasn't really accountable to many other people. And when I did quit my job and I got my own machine, it was like the idea was that I would just become more marketable in a short, like I felt like I was capable of probably setting up and programming and running machines and doing all these higher level things. I felt like I probably was really close to that, but I couldn't quite snag those jobs because I didn't quite have that experience. And so just a relatively brief stint of doing that stuff would have put me in a different class with regard to like how much money I could make working for other people. And I feel like as you get older and as you get better jobs and more promotions, and especially if you have like a house, like a mortgage, and you have kids and stuff, it's only going to get harder to leave the job. And so I feel like I would encourage a lot of people, like when you're younger and you have less like risk, and you have less to gain by staying put, just get out of there, man. Just like you just got to get out of there while you still can, because it's just going to get harder as the longer you're there.
Totally. Well, and the other point he made that really hit home for me was like there is a giant opportunity cost to not going full time.
Oh
Like I
yeah,
am
massive.
underserving my customers. Like I I am at capacity pretty much all the time. And like I do little things here and there to like, oh, I freed up 5 hours this week so I can take on an extra job. But like without going full time, I cannot really grow any further than where I am. Like, and I think that that's why it's taken me so long to really get to this point where I'm convinced is like we weren't operating at peak efficiency for where we are. And like now with the new mill and like we're starting to kind of revamp the business so we're a lot faster about quoting and all that stuff. I'm starting to feel that constraint of like, okay, I am now, I mean, nobody's operating at 100% efficiency, but like I am doing near about the best I can do running a shop and working 40 hours a week. And like, this is all the work I can possibly take on at this point in my life.
Yeah.
I need to go full time. So it really, all of these things have conspired for me to like really get my shit together. And I think, like I said, I will not be working where I am now this time next year.
Yeah.
And granted,
Now,
like this is also, like you said, COVID times and things are super uncertain. So I guess we'll see. But like, at least this gives me 8 to 10 months to like really get my finances in order, get a nice little cash reserve in the business, and like get there. So
yeah. When is the last time that you didn't have anything to do at Prodium where like, you came in and you're like, oh, I guess I don't really have any customer parts to quote or to run, or like there isn't really any work to do. Like when's the last time that ever happened?
3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Like just like, I mean, think about the opportunity cost of like your own, for me anyway, my growth was so much more rapid once I had the opportunity to do it. And you don't get, I mean, for you, like maybe your day job is actually pretty sweet and challenging in the right kinds of ways that you're still learning there. And it probably pays better and has a lot better benefits than what I was getting because the nature of what you're doing. But I just feel like, a lot of times at a job, they want you to work. They want you to perform the same things that you already know how to do because you're efficient and you're productive. They don't want you to learn that often because like that's, and when you're doing your own thing, there's always such a small business anyway. There's always such a variety to it. One day you're trying to figure out some legal tax crap that's no fun, and then you're trying to set up, like I just set up DHL for international shipments. That was a pain in the ass, but now I have it, and like now I know a little bit more about that. Or you're researching some new thing all the time, and I feel like just you fast track your own development and your own expertise. And it just like, I think it also, when you are working for yourself, it really helps you clarify what you need to do. And it seems like you have pretty good discipline about like staying focused on what you need to do and getting that stuff done. But I think for me, I always treated my shop as sort of like a hobby zone, and it was for fun. And it was once I had the CNC and I had quit my other job and I said, like when I run out of money, I have to go back to work. I can't let that happen. And I think I've been like a more serious and focused person with better discipline than I've ever been because of that. And so I think that has been really helpful to me to give myself some consequences or something.
yeah, totally. No, and I just said that recently to somebody. We were talking about going full time, and I was like, "Yeah, I really wish I hated my job because it would make this whole thing a lot easier." Like, we started Prodium because I was unhappy with the first place I worked. Like,
And then you
I
found a good
liked my,
spot.
yeah. Well, I mean, it took me two other shops to work through that I hated also, but like now I've really found a place like I am encouraged to learn every day, and like I can take time out of my day to just do a deep dive on something that I think will benefit the place. And I'm given a lot of buying power and a lot of autonomy, which is all the things that like all the reasons that I wanted to start my own business. But man, like I've taken days off before to like go into my shop and work, and even a you know 16-hour day at my shop is so much better than a 10-hour day at my day job.
Better. I should just like pretend to be in the job market and go like, I shouldn't do this. This would be a dick move. But like, I just should like work a day or a week somewhere else just to remind me of how much better this is. Cause I probably take it for granted sometimes. I'm sure I do. But yeah, I mean, even like being really frustrated about your own problems and your own crap, I think for someone like me is a lot better than having, an easy or decent day at a shop working for other people. I just, yeah, to like just, I don't know, it's like an ego thing. I think like it just feels good to be like working on your own stuff and to feel like your own life, even when it's frustrating. It's like, but these are my problems, and it feels good to like be in the middle of them or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean it's like home ownership. Like I'm not there yet, but I can only imagine it's much better to feel paying into equity on your home than it is renting and paying somebody else's mortgage.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, but and the reason I don't agree with that is because I feel like with the house, some amount of it does go into equity, and that it's not meaningless. But I do feel like everybody that I know who gets a house, they like now every night and every weekend they have this like project hanging over their head that they know they ought to do, and I feel like there's such a low return on that. Like the ROI on doing home improvement projects and building yourself a nice house, and then after 30 or 50 or 5 years or however many long you sell it, I feel like there's a little bit of a return there. But like if you already have a business and you have machines and you have work that you can be selling, there's like way more ROI in that. And if you're not paying like a stupidly inflated rent somewhere, just keep renting. And then like if you want to buy a house because it solves some problem for you, like you have a bunch of kids and you need more space, or you want something that feels homey, like those are different. Like, like solve for that. But I feel like a lot of people have this idea that like they're throwing their money away with rent. And I feel like I don't know. It's nice because it arbitrates that like list of chores always, like fixing things. It's like it's not your problem. It's like the landlord's problem, and it,
Oh, there's definitely some upsides to renting. Don't
yeah,
don't get me wrong. Like, yeah, if that water heater breaks and floods your entire place, not having to pay for any of that is
yeah. It's like a
pretty
phone call.
attractive.
You make a phone call to your landlord and you say, "You got to deal with this. I'm going to work," and then you just go to your own shop and you make a couple $1,000s or whatever it is that you make in a day doing your own thing, and you go home and hopefully it's taken care of appropriately. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's kind of dive into our my normal
yep.
post questions. What's going on in your shop this week?
Oh, hiring.
Yes, so let's go down that path.
That's a big one. I so I never wanted to hire people really, or I was very hesitant to for a long time, and it's just gotten to the point where I think it's kind of inevitable. And I've been very much listening to, like the Business of Machining and any other source where people are talking about hiring and employees and that sort of thing. I feel like I've been very aware of that discussion for a long time, so I'm not entering this with like no perspective, but I have never managed people, and so it's a huge thing. And that's the main thing that I've been thinking about this week, and then also revising this design for this tool that I'm trying to release, the frame building fixture. But yeah, that's been cool because my company has enough of a profile that there's definitely like a lot of people applied when I said that I was looking for people to work with. And most of them were not in my immediate area. And I'm like, sorry, like I'm trying to find somebody as local as possible. There's like somebody in Switzerland and somebody in India and like, all these like Texas and Arkansas and out west. And it's like if I had to expand my search radius, I guess I could consider, but never having hired someone before, even if they were the perfect candidate and they were willing to relocate, it's just like a lot of pressure. Like it better work out if they're going to move here. Like it better work out for them because I can't, like what if they're a bad fit and I have to let them go? I'm going to feel terrible about that. So
Yeah. Oh, totally. So are you looking for somebody that you can train that is not as skilled then?
yeah, I feel like what I need is help with everything, right? And so like I can do everything, and so if I hire somebody who can just help me with some of it, then we'll get everything done. So I want somebody who's like got a good attitude and who's competent, right? Who can sort of figure things out. And we're in the beginning, it's just like packing, shipping, assembling orders, maybe running to anodize, feeding the machine. It's pretty easy to teach somebody how to run the machine, like advanced parts and stuff. And then organizing the shop and building out the shop is a huge one because it's such a nice space and it's kind of a pigsty since I moved in here because I have identified that other things are a priority. But I'm trying to find somebody who can do that. And in the bike industry, machining is such a different world. I think a lot of people have a different attitude about machining, and there's more opportunity in machining. Like if you're driven and you're talented, you can get into better paying jobs and stuff. But there's just a lot of young people in the bike industry who love bikes to death, and they will work at a bike shop for like just really not much money because it's like the lifestyle they want, and they're surrounded by something that they love and they're passionate about. And so relative to that, I feel like there's a lot of mechanically inclined people who work in bike shops who would love to have some sort of exit from that world that's not it's not very green pastures as you start to grow up. And I feel like if I can find somebody from that world who wants a new opportunity and a new challenge, if they come and work for me and they have the right attitude to do the work that needs to get done, they will, through osmosis and through small lessons here and there, they will learn how to run CNC machines, And basically, I'm not going to like stop them from learning anything. So if they want to watch YouTube videos, and I would maybe even pay somebody to take a class at Saunders or something at some point, after they'd worked for me for a little while, or teach them stuff here and there. But like basically, you would have the ability to learn all about manufacturing and CNC machining, and you'd have access, conditional access to my shop after hours to use the Haas or the lathe or, the TIG welder and the different machines that I have around here. And I feel like for the right person, that's a huge perk. And so it's just a little bit tricky, but not that tricky, to find the right kind of person that is really interested in those other perks. And like in the beginning, all I'm asking is relatively simple work. So I can't really afford to, and I don't know that it makes sense to offer a huge wage, but I want it to be fair. And then basically I want to be able to offer, the sort of appropriate raises that track with their skills and development, so that I can start somebody with the right attitude. So like I had a couple people apply who already have a lot of experience with machining and fabrication, and that's just not what I want. Like they probably have better job offers elsewhere, and they would be bored doing this simple work, and their ideas about how we should machine the parts, I don't know that I would agree with them. So like I want to hire somebody who doesn't already think they know everything, who's just happy to like have the opportunity to kind of figure it out with, be shown the way that I do it. And I'm very specific about, there's 100 good ways to machine the parts, but like I'm trying to build a system where it just kind of happens, like the programs are set and we just rerun them. And
So one thing I was thinking about, since you posted about your job opportunities, and then you sent me that video the other night of the Amp Lab, is you might want to reach out to them and see if they have any students that are looking for part time, because like they would already have experience with
yeah,
machining, and I mean, it seems like college kids always love bikes and are riding bikes, and so you might find somebody that fits what you want, and you don't have to start them from like, this is what a mill is, this is what a lathe is, but like at least they're a student, so you don't have to pay them like a ton of money. They're not a professional, but it might be something that fits you pretty well.
yeah. Well, I have gotten a lot of good candidates have come to me, and so the one sort of like archetype or whatever of a prospective candidate that I imagined would be somebody who's been working in a bike shop, but the other one is the sort of frame builder. So like, that's my customer base, right? Is people who are these artisan bike builders. And you can try to build bicycles, titanium and steel, like really beautiful, excellent stuff. You can try to do that as a business and make money. But I feel like for the most part, people doing that, they have sort of a starving artist mentality, which is to say that like they just want to make something beautiful, and it's not about the business, it's not about the money. Like maybe they have some aspiration to one day pay the bills, but like it's really more about the craft and making something that they're proud of. And so for a lot of these people, because they don't approach it with much of like a business plan or a business mentality, it doesn't make them any money, right? And so like just to have the day job option to be in this world would be a big deal. And so some of the people who are interested in working for me have experience with like fabrication of bikes, and being able to have access to like my shop and my TIG welder and stuff would be a huge deal for those people. And those people know more about machining typically than like someone who's just 22 years old that's been wrenching in a bike shop for a couple of years. And so yeah, I have had a couple of those prospective people, and I probably will be able to hire somebody who has more than zero background with machining.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about training somebody your way from the ground up, but like it's also nice when they have at least a base level understanding
Yeah,
of what's going on. So
I think I'm clarifying this a lot more now. And I think when you're like 5, 10 employees in, like John Grimsmo or something, you need to start hiring people who already have a lot of experience, because you've already like established a company culture and a workflow. So you don't need to worry so much about them coming in and like tainting your ecosystem with their ideas or something. Like if it's the right fit, they'll see that and come to you. And if not, and like anyway, and you just don't have the time to like teach them. But like right now, what I really need help with the most is just this basic stuff. So it's like, I'm offering them like get in on the ground floor, right? Like if you want to stay here for 5 years, you will get really good at machining and running parts, and I will teach you to design, do the cam and the CAD, and you could be making fixtures for me for production and all this stuff. But like, like you got to start at this level that what I'm looking for. And yeah, so I don't know. I feel like whenever I listen to anybody give advice about hiring, it seems like I hear very often that like, for your first person, like you just want to hire for attitude and and interest more than you want to hire for like hard skills.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, an intelligent person can pick up on almost anything, if they're motivated. So it definitely
Yeah.
makes more sense hiring somebody that has a good attitude that you want to work with, that's
Yeah.
intelligent, and then go from there.
And they have to be mechanical. They have to like, because some people, I don't know, like I tend to think people can learn anything if they want to, but I feel like I know a bunch of people who are just not mechanical, and like you can't teach them. Like it's just because they're not interested. So, and they probably wouldn't apply for the job if they weren't mechanical. But
Well, I saw your whole story about how you specifically left off like your email and stuff, and had people reach out to you asking for that, and it's like, come on, you can do the modicum of work it is to like go to your
yeah.
website or something and find your email.
Yeah, I posted in my Instagram story. I actually took that one down after a minute because it felt like maybe certain people would feel like I was calling them out or something. But yeah, no, when I posted about the job listing, I told people to email me, but I didn't include my email address. And I kept getting these two Instagram DMs. People would ask me where I was located. That one's in my Instagram bio. It says Grand Rapids, Michigan. And then people would ask me for my email, and that one's on my website. But anyway, it's just like what it tells me. If somebody sends me the message asking for those things, it tells me that they wouldn't even put 2 seconds into looking for the answer before asking the question. And that's just not somebody I want to work with. So, like, I don't want to judge somebody based on like a snap decision based on some little thing, but it's a good filter. It's like the people who just see the post, because that's the only place I put it was on Instagram. And then to get an email a little while later from somebody that I've never emailed before, and they give me like a real resume and stuff, it suggests that they saw the post, they took action on it, they solved their own problem of figuring out how to do it, and they gave me something halfway presentable. And it's like, that doesn't tell me everything about the person, but it tells me a little bit. And it's like I did that with my frame fixture too. This product that's going to be $4,000 or $5,000 when I release it. And right now there's way more demand because I can't really ship any of these. And so I could make it super easy to get people in my like sales funnel by making it really easy, like swipe up and click this thing or whatever. But instead I gave specific directions when I post about it or talk about it. I say, like email me in quotations, I want the creator as the subject line because it's called the creator frame fixture. I like put that in the subject line. And so it's like, yeah, I'm making my customers work, which is kind of annoying because like I should work for them, right? Because they're my customers. But what it does is it just sort of qualifies my leads that like if somewhere in my inbox I search I want the creator and like there's 40 emails or something, it's like these people are pretty good prospects. They're probably pretty interested in buying it. So when I first release it, I won't be able to keep up with demand. And eventually I think I will. And then I'll have them sitting on the shelf and I'll be trying to sell them. I'll have to market it more. But in the very beginning, people really want this thing and it's not out yet. And so in the beginning, I just want to have these qualified leads that I know, like these people on this email list, like they put in some work. They're pretty interested in buying it.
Yeah, I think that that's totally fair, and totally fair for you to do with your job listing too. Like
Yeah.
I that's not a very high bar to set. Is like,
Yeah.
go to my website and look up the two pieces of information you might have an idea with. It's like posting on Craigslist and saying like, if the ad's still up, the product's still available, and then you get 40 emails
Yeah.
that are like, is this still available? And it's like, oh, buddy.
Yeah. Um, what was I going to say about Oh, I think, the bike industry attracts people who love bikes and they just, they want to, like, if you work in a bicycle shop, you're going to see all the local riders and you're going to get to work with bikes. You're going to get to build up some really nice ones. So there's some perks there. I also think the bike industry tends to attract sometimes or a lot of times people who just like didn't really want to get a real job because it didn't sound like fun. And so I get that and that's fine, but like I need to know that if I'm going to hire somebody who comes directly from like the bike shop bike world, that they're not helpless and that they can solve their own problems. And I'm sure many of them can, but like that's part of why I wanted to put that filter up, because if you've only ever worked in a bike shop or something and you don't have a lot of experience, like just with a variety of different work things and stuff, I just want to make sure that they're not totally helpless. And I'm sure many people are not, but probably some are.
Yeah. And going back real quick, just to touch on it, congrats on getting to where you are with your frame fixture. I was going back through your Instagram the other day and saw like your initial frame fixture from years ago, and like it has come so far and looks so good now. I'm really looking forward to seeing you release that. It really is quite the epic piece.
Yeah. The first one I made before I knew how to use CAD, and I made it all on my Bridgeport, in my manual lathe, and it's kind of similar in a lot of ways functionally. But when you're trying to engineer the whole project so that it's very manufacturable and so that it's versatile to work with all different kinds of people and all their needs, and it's something that ships well, and it's, just all these things, I feel like the whole project, I could have finished this project in like a couple weeks if I was just trying to recreate something that already existed or just make it kind of work. But when you're trying to make a whole project really work well and not have to go back and make 100 little incremental revisions later, that's hard, man.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a it's a serious assembly. Like watching you go through all the little parts and stuff, and talk about them on your Instagram stories, and like we've talked about them a little bit, and there's a lot that's going into that, and you've really thought out a lot of the really cool indexing features and angle stuff, and it's yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah, a good fixture for building a bike frame. If you're going to build a couple bike frames a month, or at least a couple a year or something, or some people are building 5-10 a week. They're in a bigger production facility. But anyway, you should be able to set the linear and angular variables in like under a minute. You should be able to set all of them to scales that are already on there. Like I think Welding Tips and Tricks, Jody had a YouTube video where this one frame builder, Mike Zanconato, had sent him a tube set, and then Jody welded it up, and it was cool to watch Jody do a bike thing. But anyway, he had like just a general fabrication tool with the layout holes, the 16 millimeter holes or whatever, and the different clamps, and he rigged it up, and it was mostly pretty good. But you spend a long time getting it in order, and you might spend half an hour or something really getting all these pieces. You want a really tight fit at your joints, like less than a fingernail or something, where the tubes come together, because it's thin wall stuff that you're trying to get a good weld on. It needs to be a tight fit up. So getting everything set up just so, you just lose a ton of time, and then you're welding it on the horizontal, which is a pain in the ass for a lot of reasons. And so to have a fixture that just sets up quickly, that gives you good weld access, and that's like pretty looking, and all the linear motion is nice and smooth, and it's kind of tough. But the beauty of CNC is that like a lot of these parts are just as much work to make, whether the design sucks or the design is great. So if you get the design good and then you end up selling a bunch of units, then that design is worth its weight in gold. And so I'm really just trying to get that as good as I can.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're very nearly there.
Yeah. And I have to thank Tom Lipton as my number one mentor from afar when it comes to all these design considerations. Cause I just feel like nobody ever gave me as much enthusiasm for like making stuff, and like as many like good, useful tips that you can enact as him. And I think I'll always tell people about like, oh, he made the heavy duty steady rest for his lathe, and he made the etching press for his wife, and he made this, hydraulic press and this thing and that thing. And I don't know. I know a lot of people know Tom Lipton if they've watched his stuff. And I just think a lot of times it's hard to even realize these projects. Like, I don't know where you would point someone if you wanted to show them a picture of like the etching press Tom made or some of these other things. But it's like, it's only once you really start to sit down and watch these half-hour long videos that like, I feel like you really get into the meat and potatoes. So like what makes that so valuable. And there's a lot of good tip videos, and, like the guy who does Edge Precision and Rob Renzetti, and there's a ton of people that I've learned a lot from who make videos and stuff. But I don't know, something about Tom's is just always going to have this magic place in my heart.
Yeah, Tom's a great guy. He was fantastic to have on the podcast, and his videos, they are just really really cool. Like I've been watching his aerodynamic bearing videos
Yeah,
recently, and
so good.
yeah, it's like, man, now I want to make one. Like I have zero reason to want one. I have zero reason to make one, but now I want to make one.
So there's a bike trade show that moves around every year, and it was in Sacramento in this like almost 2 years ago in March. And so anyway, I had never been to California, but I flew out, and Jeff Tiedekin and his partner Crystal like put me up for the better part of a week, which was amazing. Thank you, Jeff. And so I got to know Jeff a lot better, which I always admired Jeff. And Jeff has been an inspiration to me because I feel like he's just this bold guy who just like got some crazy idea and then he actually does it. And I just have so much admiration for the people who kind of put their ideas into practice,
Yeah,
like living in your machine shop. But anyway, so cool to like get to know them, and all like the people that he introduced me to in that short period there. Just so cool. Such like, it's just the most inspiring thing that ever happened to me. And I always come from this sort of modest places, in the Midwest. My dad was a farmer, and then I worked in this this very modest like machine shop where it's just honest people doing hard work for honest pay and boring parts and whatever. And then you go out there and you see it's all these stupid tech company charming idiots who like they have an idea, they convince some venture capitalist investors to throw money at it, and now the situation they're in is like they need this thing done yesterday and they have money and they don't care what it costs. They need talented people to help them realize their vision. And so if I could go back to when I was 22, I'd just move to the Bay Area and I'd just get a job working for one of these companies. And I mean, I'm happy with where I'm at now, so that's cool too. But like, anyway, I didn't realize that kind of opportunity existed back, well, now and back then. If you're going to work for somebody, like, what an awesome place to go. And when I was out there, I got to tour Tom Lipton's, the Berkeley labs, because it's a government lab and they'll show you around. So it's like John Saunders did a tour there. But anyway, Tom gave me a tour. It was like all freaking morning. It was like 3-4 hours. He was showing me around there. And then it was lunchtime and I was like, can I buy you lunch? And then, we like left there and we went to this place and I bought him a burger and a milkshake and we were talking. And he's like, I really got to get back to work. It's like the coolest thing ever. Tom is amazing. And he always be near and dear to my heart. So anyway, if anybody who has an opportunity to go to that part of the world and see that shop and any of that other stuff, I just think there's a really cool energy. People they're not afraid to dream big. Like they're the same kind of people. They're not any smarter than us average modest people. They're just like, they're not really, it's like in Inception when Tom Hardy says, you mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling. And he's talking about a gun or something. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think that really informs where I'm at now. It's just like I want to do good work and I want to work hard at it and all that. But like I don't want to have these small dreams. Like there's no reason you can't dream big and want big things and do it.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I love the phrase "charming idiot" because that definitely describes some of those.
I'm sure they're not, but it's easy to feel that way. Because it's like all these half-baked ideas you hear about that it's like they got $27 million to do this and like, wait, to do that?
Right.
Jeff has a lot of those stories. Like there was one about some like rideshare company, but for pilots or something. And he's like, it breaks all these FAA rules and it's terrible. Da, 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 and like this like making out all these charming idiots at the heads of companies to be these like con men essentially. I'm not trying to put words in Jeff's mouth, but I hear that theme a lot that these people have they're because they're so charming they can get the capital from these investors. So
yeah, it all makes sense. I'll have to ask him about it. I'm sure he'll have to be back on so we can finish our 6-hour episode.
Jeff's my favorite for sure. Anyhow, I had made a list, but I had kind of covered most of those things. Oh, what have you been researching this week? That's one of the questions, right?
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that, but you beat me to it. So let's see. I just had it up on my phone. Oh, so one thing is I'm like diving into ACH payments. Like I think I've done one or two in the life of our business, and like now I've got a few customers that are like, "Hey, can we not pay you checks and do this?" And so like I have to. There's not much research to do there, but at least a little bit.
What ACH payments? What is that?
Yeah, it's like a direct payment, more or less. It's similar to a wire, but they batch them 3 times a day, and there's lower fees on them versus credit cards or something like that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I do a lot of PayPal invoices, and that the fee on that kind of sucks. And then I have a web store, and I'm trying to get it so that everything you can just buy through the web store, which is kind of a mess because you got to have a really good it's great, but like getting it set up can be a little complicated because all the shipping quoting is critical to that, and that gets a little complicated. But I really need to put some time into that because I lose a ton of time to like quoting shipping and invoicing people manually. But also the fee associated with, I think it's 3 or 4% from PayPal. It's not nothing.
Yeah, it sucks. So that's one reason. Like I prefer to get paid by check, and most of our customers are fine with that because they're old school anyway. But I've got a few that are like, we can pay you by check, but it'll be a lot quicker if you just do this. I'm like, oh, well, I guess I should look into it then. So I was looking into that, and then I'm also looking into creating a different web store or another host for our Within Tolerance podcast t-shirts. and like merch and stuff like that. Because right now we're going through Store Frontier, and they just like gouge everyone on shipping.
Hmm.
I appreciate everybody, anybody who wants to buy a shirt, like we have them on Store Frontier. It's, I think it's storefrontier.com/with intolerance. The link is in our bio, but like I do apologize up front. Like I think I bought two shirts for contest winners, and like shipping on two shirts was like $15.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on, it's a t-shirt. You can throw it in a flexible envelope and it's like $5. Like, don't
Yeah.
tell me it's $15. And somebody reached out and was like, hey, I'm international and the shipping is as much as your t-shirt is. And I'm like, I have no control over that. So anyway, I'm looking into a few different
Yeah.
ways to do that. Like I might have to make a front end on my website that then backfeeds to these fulfillment centers. But we'll see. I also might just look into local sourcing. Again, I've done some local t-shirts, and the first place I went to I wasn't super happy with, so I just started going online. But I'd like
Yeah.
to support local if I can.
Yeah, it's hard shipping smaller stuff. And like one of the reasons I haven't integrated my web store better is that I have these small things that will fit into a USPS priority mail small flat rate box, and they're kind of heavy. And so for like 7, $8, whatever, I can ship them anywhere in the United States with tracking. They get there in 2 days. And USPS does a great job domestically 99% of the time or more. And so that's a winner. And if I had to send it by weight and distance, which is how they usually calculate postage, it would be more money because it's kind of heavy, but they fit into the small box, right? Because they're like blocks of aluminum and stainless steel and whatever. So it's been kind of hard to like change it so that my web store is all automated and it ships by weight and distance because I feel like it's gonna start costing people more money to get the same thing. But what that means then is that I can't. It's not a scalable process. Like I can't offer like basically right now if you order my stuff you have to select the product as either domestic or international, and then the price is different, and then there's no shipping that's assessed, and then it doesn't work because like my bigger products then I have to charge the shipping manually, and I have to do all this quoting, and I need to switch it so that everything is just calculated by weight and distance, and it knows the weight of everything and it knows the distance based on what the person puts in the checkout information, and it just happens automatically. And yeah, my customers might have to pay a couple more bucks, but like it's a process that I can live with, and hopefully the tools provide enough value that it doesn't kill too bad. But with
Well, it
stuff
might be
like
worth reaching out to like we have a FedEx account now, and we got hooked up with their one rate program.
yeah,
And so like anything that fits in a small box, no matter the weight, I mean it could be like 300 pounds of tungsten, ships for $5 or whatever it is. I don't remember off the top of my head, but like we've got one rates for small and medium boxes because those are the ones we use the most often.
yeah,
And then like, but I think that if you shipped, everything in every different size, they would give you one rate prices for all of that, and that way, I don't know how your storefront back end works. But if it could figure out just like what fits in what boxes, or if you could tell it what fits in what boxes, then you could just have flat rate shipping for certain items up to a certain point, and keep that like how you're doing with USPS, but for bigger items too.
yeah. Well, I guess part of what I'm saying is I think I need to move away from the flat rate stuff just because like with a flat rate box, yeah, I can fit one of them into one flat rate box, but then what about two of them, or what about one of this and one of that? Like it becomes exceedingly complicated to try and fit it. And so I think when you look at like more integrated automated systems, they just go by weight and distance, and it's on you to put it in a box that fits. And so then if they get two of this and one of that, or they just get one of this or whatever, it's just calculated by weight and distance. It's a pretty simple calculation. And then your customer gets to choose which carrier they want, and they can compare rates themselves. And all that decision making happens on their end, and you just get like a postage label basically. And so I think in order for me to scale my process, I need to stop using flat rate stuff, even though sometimes if you put in the effort to figure out how it can go, you can save a little bit of money. But
Yeah,
but
no, that makes total sense. You're looking for automated processes and not for
yeah,
you want to eliminate you from the equation as much as possible. So that makes total sense.
yeah, and with t-shirts it's even harder because it's like the dollar value of the product relative to the distance that you're trying to move it, and it just becomes hard. Like it is going to double the cost of the shirt for international customers, I would imagine, a lot of times.
It will up to a point. Like I looked into it once somebody reached out about that, and like paying $25 for a $20 t-shirt seems a little crazy. And then I looked into it and I was like, oh well, like if I had shipped it myself through USPS, it would have been like $12 or $13 or something like that,
Yeah.
which makes a little more sense. Like it still sucks, but like that's just international shipping. But like paying more than the cost of the product
Yeah.
hurts, and I
It
totally
does.
understand why that person reached out and like
Yeah.
it just is what it is. So
Yeah, it's hard because it's like I relate completely, but it's like there's only so much power you have to do. So you got to look into your options, and then at some point you have to say like, yeah, if I'm going to ship a small, low dollar, lightweight item across the world, it might cost more for shipping than the product. And
yeah. So I was looking into. There's a few different fulfillment centers. The one I'm looking into right now is Printful, and so you select like you post all of your products, and they have fulfillment centers around the world. And so like even in Europe, the first product ships for $4 or $4.39.
nice.
So as long as they're near a fulfillment center that they have, or a print fulfillment center, then it's not that bad, and they have the same kind of shirt that I want, and they actually have more options as far as like logo on the sleeve, or inside out label or something like that. So
Yeah.
um, we'll see. I got to kind of go in and price everything out and make sure that it all works, but I'd much rather do that and be able to make it easier and cheaper for people to get our merch than have it all go through an easier place that charges them an arm and a leg.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and if it's a system decision where you can procure this option, and now people just have it as an option and it's done, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see. I'll keep the podcast updated on it as I go through it.
Um, we're at like about the 2 hour mark now. I have a question I could ask you about what you've been working on this week, but I don't want to extend this indefinitely if you need to get going.
Oh no, I've got one part to make today, or one part number to make today, and I've got plenty of time left. So
So tell me about this crazy rush job you were running this week.
there's not much I can say about it other than it had some pretty tight tolerances and longer cycle times. And again, running at the 41st hour every week means that like I was there till 1 a.m.
That sucks.
Wednesday and Thursday, and I think I was there till 10:30 Monday night as well. And then I had that rush job that was due. It was supposed to be there Thursday and ended up being there Friday because the second operation on it just gave me fits. It was cutting, some taller wall stuff that was really thin, and I had to find a tool path that didn't take forever, but also produced a result that I was happy with. Um, and then so we had a rush job. Then I just shipped another rush job yesterday. I've got one to ship. Well, I was supposed to have two to ship Monday, but the customer was supposed to supply material for one of them and only shipped us half the material.
Wow.
So on one hand, I was like kind of frustrated about it, and on the other hand, I was like, well, it's not on my plate anymore. I can just email them and say, hey, you need to fix this, and then I'll work on it whenever I get the material. So it took at least one job off my plate, which was nice. So I got one more to ship Monday, and then I think I've got that whenever that material comes in, I've got that one to do. And then I don't think I'm taking on any more work until the new year because we've got Christmas ornaments that we're making for all our customers. I just ordered material for that, just finished the design for the most part. And so I'm going to start working on those and then take a week off, I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's always
That's
it's it's definitely a time suck every year. And like we always wait until the last freaking second, of course. Cause like November and December are always my busiest months. I don't know if it's like engineers that realize they have budget left over or if they have deliverables that they need done before the new year or before they go on vacation or what it is. But like every year, this time of year, it is like one rush job after another, just ad nauseum, it seems like. So we always wait till like the week before Christmas or like a week and a half before Christmas to start the ornaments. We always try to push the envelope from what we did last year. Like our first year we did them was just a two op, easy engraving on both sides and a contour. The second year was 3D machining on both sides. This year it's 3D machining on both sides and a third op and then some assembly. Um, but it's a fun project to kind of get to play with toolpaths in a way that I normally wouldn't do it for customer orders and push my design skills a little bit and just make something cool. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I really I bought a CNC machine partly just because I wanted to make cool stuff, and then I started to have some success. And I've always identified that for me, it's more important to not go back to work for other people. And so I'm just trying to get my business to a level of maturity and security where I feel like I can kind of take a breath. And I'm getting there for sure. I'm picking up a lot of speed, but it seems like there's always new investments and tooling and different things. And so like, anyway, I can't wait until I feel like I've caught my breath enough that I can afford to do those projects where you learn stuff. I think Jeff Tiedekin was saying once to me, he said, you can be learning or you can be making money, and they're sort of opposed to each other, right? Like if you're fiddling with stuff and you're playing around, you're trying to. And anyway, I feel like I just don't give myself enough of the like learning projects. Like you're always learning as you're trying to get something going. But it sounds like with the Autodesk Cam Challenge and some of those other things, like you've given yourself opportunities to really try to level up and learn things. And then once you have some experience, it's not intimidating and you can work it in while you are trying to make money on a project or something. But for me, like I never really dive that much into 3D toolpaths until I need something specific done. And then I just try to get it done and move on.
Yeah, yeah, and it definitely is a balance. Like we try not to do, you know, personal projects every month. I mean, I'd love to. I've got a million designs in Fusion that I've been wanting to make for a long time. But yeah, having one at least a year, like the Cam Challenge or ornaments or something like that, it just it's like, oh, I wonder how fine a finish I can make on this, and it's like I'm never gonna try to make a four finish 3D surfacing something for a customer because that's just a waste of company time and money. But when it's like there's no risk. Like I'm not on a time clock. It's not like, oh, I need to get this order out tomorrow. It's like, well, if I don't ship these ornaments until after the new year, then they're for next year. Like, bummer. That kind of thing. I I want them to be there before Christmas. I want them to be the actual Christmas ornaments. But you know what? It's like it's just fun. So it's always nice to have at least one project like that a year.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, like you said, I probably should get to the shop as much as I enjoy talking to you. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and taking the time out, and I'd love to have you back on in a month or two and get caught up on where you are.
Yeah, hell yeah. Maybe I'll have some feedback about employee hiring and having released this new product and all the places those things take me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Joe. Everybody, we have JSP Fab on the podcast next week, which is John Rusikoff, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. And thanks again, Joe. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, thank you.